Chapter 26, Excitement. A few days ago, just before Kishin's advertisement aired on a broadcasting channel, Shoji, a middle-aged man who had applied to work at Kishin a few weeks earlier, initially had doubts about the company. His uncertainty stemmed from Shin's young age. However, as he continued working there, he realized that the company was steadily growing, and Shoji began to see its potential. With this newfound confidence, he wholeheartedly embraced his role as the marketing specialist, tirelessly promoting the company's arcade machines in various stores and malls around Tokyo. When the arcade machines became a trending topic on TV news, profits soared. Shoji seized the opportunity to further hype up their arcade machines. His dedication and contributions didn't go unnoticed, and as a result, Shin promoted him to the position of Chief Marketing Officer. Along with the promotion came a well-deserved salary increase, leaving Shoji overjoyed. However, in the midst of his excitement over the company's and his personal success, Shin summoned him to his office. Shoji promptly arrived at Shin's office, where he was greeted with a smile and invited to take a seat. "I'm here to discuss our promotional strategy for the Famicom consoles with you," Shin said, crossing his fingers while resting his elbow on his desk. Shoji smiled thoughtfully. This product fell under his marketing responsibility, and he had already discussed it with his team. However, it seemed that the CEO didn't fully trust their capabilities yet. Nevertheless, he respectfully stated, "I've already laid out a strategy and plan for the marketing of our product, sir. But if you have any suggestions, please feel free to offer your insights, sir." Shin nodded and inquired, "Have you already decided on the channel where our advertisement will air?" Shoji nodded and explained, "Given the company's tight budget, my team believes it's more cost-effective to secure a time slot on a channel with affordable rates." Shoji was confident that their arcade machines, already popular around Tokyo, would draw attention even on an underrated channel. Observing Shin's silence, Shoji added, "Fortunately, we have valuable contacts and beneficial connections with several stores and malls. This will make it easier to reach mutually beneficial agreements for promoting our product and securing prime shelf space within their respective establishments." Shin nodded and suggested, "I recommend that we rent a time slot on an anime and cartoon channel." Shoji was somewhat surprised and asked, "Isn't it true that almost no adults or even young adults watch anime or cartoons, except children, sir?" He thought that if children were the primary audience, they might not fully understand their product. With a smile, Shin replied, "That's precisely the point. Many children will have the opportunity to see our advertisement. As you can see, our company has grown significantly by attracting children," Shin continued. "We are a game company, and apart from young adults, the primary audience for our game consoles is children." Shoji nodded thoughtfully and engaged in a brief conversation with Shin before departing. Upon arriving at work, he organized his department and the team under his responsibility. Shoji also coordinated the shooting of the commercial and provided the script that Shin had prepared to the director. The director happened to be a relatively inexperienced young man, so he didn't object when Shoji offered his input on the shoot. After these preparations, in just a matter of days, everything was in place. Kishin's retail director had also managed the necessary connections with various stores and malls. However, they encountered a minor hiccup during this process. Store and mall managers expressed concerns that selling the Kishin Ctto family computer might negatively impact their arcade businesses, especially considering the significant purchase price they had paid for the machines. In response, Shin personally contacted these managers to alleviate their concerns. Shin successfully persuaded them by highlighting that the popularity of the Ctto video game consoles would not harm their arcade machine business. Instead, it could potentially attract even more enthusiastic players to their arcades. With the assistance of his employees' calls, Shin managed to convince them that once the Ctto video game consoles were available, the arcades could thrive and potentially become a central hub for passionate gamers. The Kishin advertisement didn't create any buzz on its first day, but that was exactly as Shin had anticipated. That's why he decided to delay the release of the Ctto game consoles by a few more days before people began to take notice. As expected, after the second day of the Kishin advertisement airing on the kids' channel, households all across Japan started to pay attention. Not just in Tokyo alone, but throughout the entire country. Although the audience of the kids' channel primarily consisted of children, these children spanned beyond Tokyo and covered all of Japan. In a random house in Tokyo, a high school student named Naruki, who frequented the arcades to play Mario, hastily called his friend over the telephone. "Hello," came the voice on the other end. "Tanaka. Hurry up and switch your channel to Asahi," Naruki exclaimed with excitement. "Why? I'm not into kids stuff," began Tanaka. Naruki interrupted Tanaka with urgency, "Just switch it to Asahi channel." Tanaka was perplexed but relented, saying, "Fine, fine. No need to shout, you'll deafen my ear." "What's this all about, anyway?" Naruki quickly explained, "Just switch to Asahi and wait for the Kishin advertisement." Tanaka nodded but caught a familiar word, Kishin. Tanaka changed the channel on his TV while still holding the portable telephone. "Kishin has an advertisement, Naruki?" Tanaka asked as he settled in front of the TV. Naruki hurriedly clarified over the phone, "At first, I was annoyed because my younger brother switched the channel from the sports channel to the kids channel. But then, I was completely shocked to see a Kishin advertisement on it." "Really?" Tanaka felt intrigued. What did an arcade company have to do with advertising, anyway? He couldn't understand why Naruki was reacting so strangely. Naruki shouted through the phone, "Look! The advertisement is starting." Naruki had never been excited about an advertisement before. Tanaka watched the Kishin commercial closely. It began with a child entering a house, formally greeting their parents, and then Tanaka paused as his eyes widened. "What's this? An arcade? In a house?" Tanaka stood up in astonishment. After finishing the commercial, he urgently asked his friend Naruki, "What's today's date?" Naruki, puzzled by Tanaka's urgency, asked, "How could you not know? Just answer." Tanaka demanded. "July 21, Naruki replied simply. "There are still 4 days left." Tanaka roared excitedly. Chapter 27, Unaware Suzuki Family. The Kishin advertisement on the kids' channel began to garner attention from people in the Tokyo area. Even prominent corporations like Torah Corporation took notice. Kenji, the youngest son of Torah Corporation's chairman, felt compelled to request a meeting with his father after witnessing the Kishin advertisement. To be candid, he never expected Kishin to create a home arcade. The idea was so noble that it astonished both him and Taki, the senior manager. Asahi Tanaka, the chairman of Torah Corporation, sat in his grand and spacious office. He observed the city through the transparent walls as his youngest son entered. "So, what would you like to discuss with me?" Asahi inquired, maintaining a serious demeanor. Kenji smiled as he settled into a chair opposite Asahi and said, "You'll undoubtedly find what I'm about to say intriguing, father." Asahi's expression turned stern as he responded, "Please refrain from calling me father during work." Kenji's smile waned as he looked somewhat helpless and replied, "You're quite serious at work, I see." Asahi gazed at Kenji sternly and emphasized, "At work, you're an employee, and I'm your boss. I've instilled that discipline in you for a reason." Kenji, feeling somewhat helpless, uttered, all right, Chairman Tanaka, I'm here to discuss an intriguing matter with you." Asahi's expression reverted to its usual demeanor as he inquired, "Oh, what kind of proposition do you wish to discuss?" Kenji awkwardly smiled. His father had a penchant for formalizing work-related conversations, converting intriguing matter into proposition. Kenji handed the document he held to Asahi, placing it on the desk's surface. Asahi picked it up and began to read. The document was authored by Kenji, detailing Kishin, PCB, and recounting information about arcade machines and more. A frown creased Asahi's brow as he read on. He was familiar with Kishin, his Ctto had already briefed him. However, his interest in such a small company was limited. Though he had started small himself, his responsibilities to shareholders and maintaining transparency were paramount. Even if he found Kishin's arcade machines intriguing, it was unlikely the shareholders and board of directors would think the same. The arcade industry had suffered a 97% loss during the global financial crisis, making it a risky venture. Asahi was about to voice his concerns when he reached the document's final passages, revealing images of the upcoming Kishin product, the SKT Famicom consoles. Unconsciously, Asahi tightened his grip on the paper and regarded Kenji with a serious expression. Kenji smiled and inquired, "What do you think, Chairman?" Asahi relaxed his expression and replied, "This proposal must be presented to the board of directors." Surprised, Kenji looked at his father and asked, "Are you considering the video game industry now, father, Chairman?" Asahi nodded, disregarding the slip in Kenji's address. He explained, "I had an interest in experiencing Kishin's games for myself, but with the responsibilities of overseeing thousands of employees, I must approach this with caution." He continued, "I'll discuss the possibility of creating a new subsidiary for video games and consoles with the board of directors." Asahi's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. In the grand mansion of the Suzuki family, the entire household had gathered in the dining room. Seated at the head of the table, Shiro enjoyed his meal with a sense of calm. Eri, donned in traditional Japanese attire, savored her meal alongside her husband. Their grown children occupied seats along the length of the lavish table. Reina Suzuki, a young woman just a year older than Shin, couldn't contain her excitement as she exclaimed, "Father, I really wanted to purchase the latest fashion." Shiro, trying to maintain a serious demeanor, couldn't help but crack a smile. He glanced at his wallet, ensuring it was adequately filled with cash. Reluctantly, he handed her a stack of yen notes, which left her somewhat displeased. "Is this all?" she muttered, counting a mere 40,000 yen. Shiko, the eldest son with raven black hair and above-average looks, interjected before his mother could react, "That's already quite a generous amount. You should appreciate what you receive." Reina scoffed in irritation. "Appreciate? My friends will mock me with this pocket change." Shiko's patience nearly wore thin, but before he could respond, Eri, their mother, intervened soothingly. "Let her be, Shiko. She's still young." With their father observing, Shiko reluctantly complied. However, their third brother, Seiki, couldn't remain silent. "We all have to work for our money. She should learn the same. It's only fair." Reina retorted disdainfully, "Work? No way. With a capable father like mine, a princess like me deserves to be pampered." Seiki wanted to argue further but refrained in the presence of their father. Ruki, the second daughter, remained unfazed by the family drama, engrossed in her favorite book. Eri, their mother, reproached her third son, saying, "Do you really want her to work? She's a woman, after all. Women should be homemakers, and men should be the providers." Seiki acquiesced, recognizing his mother's support for her first daughter. Reina couldn't hide her satisfaction and wore a smug smile. She extended her hand to her father, requesting more money. Shiro felt a growing headache, knowing this situation was an all too frequent occurrence in the family. Shiro retrieved his wallet and pulled out a golden card, handing it over with some urgency. "Take this. And please refrain from bothering me for a few days." Reina eagerly accepted the card and exclaimed, "Is this the Mizuho Bank Gold Privileges card? With a 20 million yen limit?" Shiro nodded, confirming, "That's for you. I hope it keeps you content for a few weeks at least." Reina scoffed, showing little regard for her father's intentions. A few weeks? Just 20 million? It'll barely last a few days. Seiki couldn't help feeling a touch of envy. His sister had just received 20 million yen so effortlessly. Rookie glanced at her sister, adjusted her glasses, and closed her book with an audible snap. The sudden attention of everyone in the room didn't faze her. She finished her meal and calmly made her way upstairs to her room. Shiko elegantly wiped his mouth after finishing his meal and addressed his father. "Father, Rookie is also a girl. Isn't it unfair that you only gave Reina, the eldest daughter, that sum of money?" Shiro huffed in response, "Rookie isn't as demanding as Reina. A few books make her happy." Reina chimed in, undeterred by her father's remark, "My younger sister lacks sophistication. She's quite dull. No wonder she gets along with someone like Shinro." Before she could finish her sentence, Shiro's voice thundered, "Don't mention that name in my house." The room fell silent, and Reina in particular grew still. Eri cast her husband a concerned look. "Calm down, dear." Shiro interrupted her, his anger directed at her as well. "It's because of you. You let that kid run wild, and now he's probably out there selling his computer and belongings just to get by." After his outburst, Shiro abruptly stood up and left the room, not even bothering to finish his meal. Once Shiro had gone, Eri turned her stern gaze toward Reina. "You know your father doesn't like it when the second and fourth are mentioned." Reina lowered her head and offered an apology. "I apologize, mother." Eri sighed and got up, departing from the dining room. Shiko and, especially Seiki, exchanged glances with Reina and couldn't help but chuckle. "Looks like you managed to disappoint father yet again," Seiki teased, his amusement evident in his tone. He relished the chance to say this to Reina. Shiko merely snorted in agreement before walking away. Seiki shot a brief, lingering look at Reina before following his elder brother. Reina found herself alone in the dining room, her frustration reaching its peak. She erupted in anger, shouting, "Damn you, Shinro! You always manage to cause trouble, even when you're not here." She slammed her hand on the table in sheer exasperation. Chapter 28, Interview and Shin's Dream. Shin sat comfortably in his soft chair, tapping the surface of his office desk. The key employees had gathered in his office. "Sir, I've been negotiating with retailers in cities outside Tokyo, but they've expressed concerns about reserving space for our Famicom consoles in the mall. Specifically, in the high-visibility, high-traffic flow shelf areas, they're demanding higher rental rates. Given our current financial condition, I didn't agree and have come to seek your opinion," explained Ohara Kobayashi, the lease manager of Kishin Electronics. Shin nodded and replied, "It's acceptable to rent shelf space in less traffic-prone areas if it means lower rental rates." Ohara followed up, "Can we still sell effectively in less attractive shelf areas?" Shin smiled reassuringly and said, "Negotiate with the mall management for promotional support of our product. The more we sell, the more it benefits them." Ohara nodded in understanding. As word spread around Tokyo, people grew eager to try out Kishin's products. The advertising campaign extended beyond kids' channels, with malls and stores throughout Tokyo enthusiastically promoting Kishin's upcoming products. Following the success of Kishin Electronics arcade machines, there were high expectations for their upcoming product, the Famicom consoles. After extensive negotiations with Kishin Electronics regarding retail and leasing arrangements, an agreement was finally reached to sell Kishin Electronics products. This came about after the CEO successfully convinced them, assuring them that arcade machines would be offered at a lower price. General Manager Kimura had initially been among those angered by Kishin's plans to potentially undermine their arcades by introducing Famicom consoles, which could impact their business at the Ikeburo Center. However, after Shin persuaded them and presented a mutually beneficial agreement, Kimura set aside his grievances. Instead, he not only agreed to sell Kishin's products but also actively promoted them throughout the Ikeburo Center. This surge in anticipation for the Famicom consoles was particularly noticeable among those who frequented Ikeburo Center. Customers who used to visit for karaoke now shifted their interest to video game machines. Although the sales of karaoke were affected, the management didn't mind. Similar trends were unfolding in other malls and stores as well. Yumi Yamamoto, a journalist from NHK, Nippon Hoso Kyokai, became intrigued by the trending coverage of Kishin Electronics arcade machines on TBS. Along with other journalists, she decided to investigate Kishin Electronics. Yumi had already noticed the Kishin advertisement on the kids' channel, but other journalists had beaten her to the story. Determined to outpace the TBS reporters, Yumi arrived at Kishin's rented building, only to discover that other journalists had arrived before her, creating quite a buzz. Other stations were aware of Kishin's first commercial on Asahi Channel, but some disregarded it while others, like NHK, took it seriously. Yumi was just one of many journalists at NHK, and numerous seasoned professionals had already expressed interest in covering Kishin's arcade machines, particularly after seeing the company's debut commercial on Asahi Channel. Yumi, being a newcomer, keenly felt the disparity between herself and the more experienced senior journalists. Following Kishin's advertisement, Koji, a TBS journalist who had been eagerly anticipating Kishin's developments, especially those involving its CEO, was quick to notice it and cover the story first. After the topic of the intriguing and unconventional arcade gained high ratings, TBS management granted Koji permission to continue exploring the subject. Consequently, the JNN News broadcast continued with Part 2 of the Kishin arcade machines story. Uninformed viewers watched as Koji introduced the segment. For those of our viewers who may not be aware, he began, we previously delved into the potential revival of the arcade era by Kishin. On the screen, the text in the foreground read, the possible reign of the arcade era. Koji initiated a discussion centered around Kishin. As the conversation progressed, the recording of Kishin's CEO's previous proclamation played, and towards the end of it, TBS journalist Koji requested permission for an interview with Shin himself. Fortunately, the request was granted, but under the condition that only half of Shin's face would be recorded. The lower part of Shin's face was the only portion allowed to be filmed, and Kishin and TBS even formalized this arrangement in a contract. With the preparations in place, Koji approached the Kishin rented building and entered the CEO's office. Since everything was pre-recorded, the interview had actually taken place when Kishin's first advertisement aired. Nice to meet you, Mr. CEO. I didn't expect you to be this young, remarked Koji as he took a seat prepared in Shin's office. Koji observed Shinru Suzuki, appearing so youthful that he could easily be mistaken for a 17-year-old. Shin smiled at Koji's surprised expression. He had just turned 18, so he still retained a certain youthful and boyish charm, although subtle stubble was already starting to grow. Koji composed himself and spoke on national television, Mr. CEO, you proclaimed that you would surprise me soon, but I didn't anticipate being not just surprised but genuinely shocked when I watched that advertisement on the kids' channel. He expressed a series of sentiments before continuing, it's such a noble idea, having an arcade in the home. But are you confident it will be as successful as the arcade machines? He expressed doubt, acknowledging that while the arcade machines had an impressive initial run, the data he had accessed indicated a gradual decline over time. Many malls and stores were hesitant to acquire the arcade machines due to this decline. Shin responded with a serene smile, and the camera zoomed in on his slender lips, which exuded a mysterious allure. I am absolutely certain that not only will our Famicom consoles find success, but they will thrive across Japan, Shin stated confidently. That's quite a bold statement, Koji exclaimed with a chuckle. While I'm curious about this new product that has captured our viewers' attention, may I ask why you started this company? He recognized that his curiosity was shared by viewers who had experienced Kishin arcades and were eager to comprehend why a company had ventured into what seemed like an abandoned arcade industry. Shin smiled warmly and replied, "I embarked on this journey because it's my dream. A dream where nearly everyone gets to know and enjoy video games." Koji expressed surprise, "A dream of everyone playing video games? Does that mean even the elderly and busy individuals will be playing? That's quite an ambitious dream." Koji offered his praise with a hint of playful mockery. Some households, whose members hadn't experienced playing arcades or were unfamiliar with video games, joined in with scoffs, finding such an idea implausible. Even those who had enjoyed Kishin arcades chuckled at the CEO's youthful idealism. It seemed unlikely that everyone, including those who had never shown an interest, would suddenly take up gaming. Chapter 29, Suzuki Financial. At Suzuki Financial Company, a subsidiary of the Suzuki Group, Ctto held the position of CEO. Despite being 25 years old, he was considered young by the employees. His position owed much to his status as the son of Suzuki Group Chairman, Shiro Suzuki. Ctto was reclining in his comfortable chair, enjoying a massage administered by an attractive female secretary. Knock knock. Ctto allowed his forehead to be massaged as he inquired, "Who's there?" From behind the door, Seiki chuckled and replied, "Seiki." Ctto gave a faint smile and responded, "Seiki who?" "I'm here to discuss a Seiki RIT business," Seiki announced in Japanese, which added a humorous touch due to his accent. The female secretary, Ino Sakamura, chuckled in response. Ctto noticed but didn't mind, joining in the chuckling. "All right, you can come in," he told Seiki. Seiki entered the office without hesitation and saw his elder brother receiving a special massage from his secretary. "Damn! I'm jealous. You get this special treatment while I have to deal with a male secretary," Seiki lamented as he glanced at Ino's curvy figure. Ctto chuckled and teased, "Then you should fire him and find a female secretary." Seiki shook his head, saying, "You know father would never agree." Ctto chuckled again. He understood that Seiki couldn't do whatever he pleased until he achieved something within the family's company. Seiki added, "Our cousin is living a life in America, I really envy him." Ctto looked at him and commented, "Our cousin? I heard he's just studying at a prestigious university there. If he returns with all that knowledge, be sure to keep an eye on him," Ctto reminded. "I know. Uncle has had his eye on the Suzuki Group for a long time. It's not just us, father should also be watching his back," Seiki agreed. Ctto remained calmly in his soft chair, still being massaged, and asked Seiki, "So, what brings you here, anyway?" Seiki smiled and said, "Didn't I tell you already? I'm here to discuss a secret business with you." Ctto's expression turned serious. "Enough with the jokes, Seiki." Seiki maintained his smile and responded, "I'm not joking. I'm really here to discuss a business opportunity for your financial company." Ctto, intrigued, touched his chin thoughtfully and asked, "Oh? What is it?" Seiki merely glanced at Ctto's secretary in response. Ctto observed this and understood the meaning behind Seiki's look. He asked, "Why is it so secretive that you want me to dismiss my secretary? Don't you trust her, Seiki?" Ctto inquired, turning his attention to Seiki. Ino, the secretary, glanced at Seiki in response. Seiki felt slightly awkward and explained, "It's crucial for the business I'm about to discuss." Ctto contemplated this for a moment before instructing his secretary, "Ino, please leave us alone for now." In response, Ino nodded and took the towel and facial care products with her as she exited the room. Once she was gone, Ctto turned his attention back to his brother, Seiki. "So, what's the matter you wanted to discuss?" Ctto asked as he settled further into his comfortable chair. Seiki nodded and retrieved some papers from his suitcase, handing them to Ctto. Ctto perused the documents, and upon finishing, he became intrigued. Kishin Electronics? I wasn't aware of such a rapidly growing company in Tokyo, Shiko remarked, a bit surprised. Seiki nodded, also surprised. You're running a financial company, how could you not be aware? Monitoring the small business market is essential for identifying investment opportunities. Shiko shook his head. Kishin isn't the only growing company in Tokyo, and our brokerage doesn't consider arcades in our investment portfolio. Seiki nodded, conceding, this company has generated quite a buzz around Tokyo and even in other cities in Japan. Shiko mused, it's indeed surprising for an arcade-focused company to thrive in this era. Seiki then asked, what do you think? Can we invest in it? Shiko considered it carefully before responding, the board of directors may not agree. You know that, despite being the CEO, I don't have sole decision-making power in this company. Plus, investing in such a company isn't in our current portfolio or plans. Seiki nodded and suggested, we could pool our own money and invest in it. Shiko shook his head, explaining, you're aware of how strongly father opposes the arcade industry, right? If he finds out we invested in such a company, it could bring us a great deal of trouble. Seiki recalled their younger brother, Shinro. Even though he's become independent, he still causes us problems. Just his name alone is enough to infuriate father. Shiko nodded in agreement. Seiki then added, chuckling, that's why I asked for your secretary to leave. So, we can discuss this privately. Shiko grasped the implication in Seiki's words. You want to invest secretly? Shiko inquired. Seiki nodded with a smile. After contemplating for a moment, Shiko made a decision. All right, I'll risk 200 million yen for this. How much will you invest? Seiki smiled and agreed, good decision. If this small company becomes profitable, it could bring us substantial returns. I'll invest 100 million. Shiko nodded and smiled, saying, in investing, you should be prepared to accept losses and withdraw when necessary. Invest only what you can afford to lose, but also anticipate the rise of stocks that can yield profits. That's the approach. Seiki agreed with a smile. Speaking of which, Kishin Electronics focuses on arcades. It really reminds us of that wastrel, Seiki remarked, chuckling. I wonder how our troublemaker brother is doing now, Shiko pondered aloud. Seiki shook his head and said, I wonder what his reaction would be if he found out we planned to invest in and support an arcade company, apart from him. Shiko chuckled and replied, he'd probably feel frustrated and curse us, saying, you're supporting others but not your poor younger brother. Ha ha ha. Seiki laughed along and said, hee hee, that's enough. Your jokes are almost as bad as my secretary's. Shiko suddenly stopped laughing and lost his smile. Seiki didn't notice at first, but then he saw Shiko's expression. Do you really think I act like your secretary? Your secretary? Shiko exclaimed angrily. Seiki felt flustered and quickly apologized, I'm truly sorry, elder brother. However, his apology was cut short when he saw Shiko chuckling. Ha 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 ha. Shiko burst into laughter as he observed Seiki's bewildered expression. Seiki pouted, gritting his teeth, and muttered, damn it. Shiko couldn't contain his laughter, slapping his legs in amusement. Seiki, in embarrassment, hurriedly exited the office. Chapter 30, Seiki's attempt to invest. Li Han was in the midst of organizing the company's paperwork when his office telephone suddenly rang. Hello. Li Han answered, not finding it unusual for someone to call him. After all, his office phone was company-owned, and its number was listed on business cards, making it public knowledge, especially among potential partners or customers like malls and entertainment centers interested in purchasing arcade machines. Is this the General Counsel of Kishin Electronics? A young voice on the other end of the line inquired. Li Han nodded, maintaining his politeness. Yes, that's correct. I'm Lee Han. How can I assist you? I'm Seiki Suzuki, the CEO of Suzuki Department Stores, Seiki introduced himself. Lee Han's reaction was immediate as he recognized the name. He felt compelled to confirm, "Are you the son of the Suzuki Group chairman?" Seiki's chuckle resonated through the phone as he confirmed, "Indeed, I am." Suzuki Department Stores is a subsidiary of the Suzuki Group. Lee Han massaged his forehead, bracing himself for yet another encounter with an arrogant young scion of a wealthy and influential family, an experience he'd grown accustomed to, even in South Korea. Seiki remained on the line, waiting, and couldn't help but smile, thinking that General Counsel Lee Han was left momentarily speechless. Lee Han regained his composure, making a conscious effort to hide his disdain for the entitled and haughty young heirs he'd encountered so often. "Is there something specific you would like to discuss, sir?" Lee Han inquired, his initial politeness replaced by indifference. Seiki, taken aback by the abrupt change in tone, expected more flattery or excessive politeness. However, he was met with Lee Han's stark indifference, a departure from his expectations. "I'd like to speak with your CEO for a business discussion," Seiki requested. Lee Han clenched his teeth, irritated by yet another wealthy young master who believed he could have whatever he wanted. "Unfortunately, sir, our CEO is currently unavailable," Lee Han replied curtly. "I see," Seiki responded with a disappointed sigh, followed by a question, "When will your CEO be available?" His tone conveyed urgency and arrogance. Lee Han couldn't help but chuckle before answering, "Our CEO prefers not to be constantly interrupted by phone calls throughout the day. He only takes calls when they are absolutely necessary for the company. Until then, he won't be available." Seiki's impatience became evident, and he urgently retorted, "I insist you call your CEO. What I have to discuss is of great importance to his company." Lee Han quietly snorted, choosing to respond with, "I'm sorry, sir. Access to our CEO is limited to those he is already familiar with. If you're not known to him, he won't answer the call." Seiki clenched his teeth, growing increasingly annoyed. "I'm the son of Shiro Suzuki, the chairman of the Suzuki Group. Am I not familiar enough?" he demanded. Lee Han shook his head and replied, "I'm truly sorry, sir," though deep inside, he felt even more contempt for this type of person. Seiki gritted his teeth in frustration and continued, "All right. I'll tell you the purpose of my call and why I want to meet your CEO." He paused briefly as Lee Han waited, then continued, "I'm interested in investing in your company." Lee Han, a bit surprised but composed, asked, "Invest?" Seiki nodded on the other end of the phone and explained, "Yes. I'm interested in Kishin, your company. There's currently no competition in the arcade market, and I believe Kishin has the potential to become a major player." Seiki's words were calculated to stroke Lee Han's ego, as it's often easier to negotiate with someone overly arrogant. "I've noticed that Kishin isn't listed on the TSA yet. I can assist in getting Kishin listed, which would facilitate further growth. This can happen if Kishin allows me to acquire a substantial portion of shares," he added convincingly. Lee Han paused, considering the proposal. He chuckled quietly and responded, "That's indeed an interesting proposition. Let me discuss this with our CEO. I don't make decisions for Kishin on my own." Lee Han proceeded to Shin's office and relayed Seiki's proposal. Despite his disdain for individuals like Seiki, who relied on their family's wealth and connections, he recognized the merit in the proposal, particularly regarding listing the company, which could greatly benefit a small company's growth. However, he made sure to voice his concerns, cautioning Shin, "Although it's a tempting offer, we should tread carefully when dealing with second or third generation wealthy individuals," Lee Han advised. Shin chuckled, realizing that Lee Han likely didn't expect his boss to come from a wealthy family. He was a third-generation heir, while his father represented the second generation of their family's wealth. Shin found it somewhat unexpected that his third brother showed interest in his company, which primarily focused on arcade machines. Tell him that Kishin Company isn't interested in going public, Shin simply instructed. He had no intention of taking his company public, especially considering his third brother's interest in investing in it. Li Han was surprised and questioned, while we should be cautious with wealthy young investors, going public does come with numerous advantages. May I ask why you're not interested in listing Kishin? Shin responded, going public would jeopardize our company's confidentiality. Furthermore, it would relinquish control over the company to numerous shareholders, especially those with larger stakes, who might interfere with my vision and plans for the company. He chuckled, emphasizing his desire to maintain full control. Li Han might find him selfish, but Shin believed it was necessary for the success of his plans. Chapter 31, Kishin Skt Famicom is about to release. Shin smiles as his brothers had finally started to take notice of his company. This time, he would allow them to experience the success of the video games he was building. If not for the Suzuki group, especially the first and third brothers, they wouldn't even have had the chance to become successful and wealthy. Shin recollected the story of how his grandfather had founded the Suzuki group. His grandfather's childhood was marred by the horrors of World War II, with even children being forced into soldier training. After the war ended, his grandfather began a small company that dealt in buying and selling materials from scrap. He learned the intricacies of motors, engines, and television technology, eventually establishing an electronics company producing televisions and cars. However, his grandfather's focus shifted when he became captivated by arcade machines, investing heavily in them. He had high hopes for the arcade industry, but it all changed with the global financial crisis, which hit every industry hard. Arcade machines suffered the most. The Suzuki Group faced bankruptcy, and it was Shin's grandfather who managed to salvage it with the remaining funds by acquiring a ramen company. With the reputation of cars and televisions already established in Japan, sales gradually increased, rescuing the struggling Suzuki company. His grandfather then expanded the business into a corporation, with several companies under its umbrella. Shin idly played with his pen, twirling it as he continued to sketch the games he had planned for the company. Kishin trademark had already begun developing games, leveraging his knowledge from his previous life. In just one day, the Skt Famicom consoles would be released in various stores and malls across Tokyo. Meanwhile, in other stores and malls in Tokyo, enthusiastic arcade players had already formed lines outside Kishin's rented store, eagerly awaiting the release. It had caught the attention of reporters who were closely following Kishin's developments. Yumi quickly approached a portly man standing in line and began interviewing him with a microphone. "Hello, I'm from NHK station. How long have you been waiting in this line?" The portly man got excited by the camera and microphone pointed at him. He composed himself and said, "Hello. Hi, Mom and Dad. I'm on TV now." He couldn't help but shout in excitement. The people around him in the line chuckled and laughed at the portly man's enthusiasm. Yumi felt a bit awkward but continued to point the microphone at him. "I've been here for hours. I really wanted to buy that Skt Famicom. But I didn't expect this line to be so long," the portly man exclaimed in frustration. Others near him chimed in with agreement, and a middle-aged man interjected, "Yet. These people are shameless. That console is for kids, after all. Why are they so eager to get it?" Others in the line took offense to the middle-aged man's comment and retorted, "What do you mean, old man? You're older than my father." "That's right." Others nodded in agreement. The middle-aged man angrily responded, "I'm buying those Skt Famicom consoles for my child, okay?" Someone from the crowd around the same age as the middle-aged man shouted, "I know you. You don't even have a wife, let alone a child. Admit that you're here to get the Kishin console for yourself." The middle-aged man grew embarrassed as he was called out. Yumi, who witnessed this exchange, was left speechless. On the television, Tokyo news channels predominantly covered the unusually long lines of people waiting at various stores and malls for Kishin SKT Famicom. Kenji and Taki watched the television with serious expressions. It seems like we underestimated the popularity of video games. Taki remarked as he continued to watch the news on television. Kenji nodded and said, "My father should understand this by now." Taki snapped out of his seriousness and looked at Kenji in surprise. "Understand what? What about your father?" Kenji, realizing his slip, quickly covered up. "Oh, it's nothing, forget it," he replied awkwardly. Taki remained puzzled but nodded in response. Kenji sighed in relief. He had forgotten that Taki didn't know his true identity. His father had intentionally assigned him to a lower position and kept his identity a secret to prevent employees from treating him differently. It was all part of his father's plan to humble him and ensure he developed the necessary skills and competence. In the main high-rise building of Torah Corporation, located in the Roppongi district of Minato Ward, Asahi Tanaka sat in his office, engrossed in watching the news on television, all the while tapping his desk thoughtfully. He was carefully weighing the advantages and disadvantages of venturing into the video game market. Seated beside him, his secretary seemed to have a sense of her boss's thoughts and offered her advice. It might be wiser to wait and see if the Kishin SKT truly becomes successful before making any decisions. Asahi nodded in agreement with his loyal and trusted secretary. "I understand. However, seeing the excitement it has generated among people in various places in Tokyo, just one day before its release, provides a glimpse of the potential profitability of this product." His secretary, Ruka, offered her perspective, saying, "You make a valid point, but keep in mind that this is limited to Tokyo. We can't be certain of its success in other cities. Besides, it's only the first day, and if the Kishin SKT doesn't meet customer expectations, it could result in a loss." She spoke confidently. Asahi nodded in acknowledgement, but secretly harbored concerns that his secretary might lack the necessary experience to fully grasp the complexities of this business decision. Chapter 32, Incredible First Sales and Unexpected Event. A day later, the SKT Famicom was finally released, and people in Tokyo eagerly waited for hours to get their hands on one. Robert had extended his stay in Tokyo solely because of the SKT Famicom. He patiently waited in line for hours. According to the advertisements, the SKT Famicom was priced at 14,500 yen each. Finally, after the long wait, it paid off as he managed to purchase the red and white Famicom from Kishin. "You'll receive 2 free games with your purchase of our Kishin SKT Famicom. You can choose any 2 you like," the sales girl said as she displayed 3 games, Pac-Man, Super Mario Bros., and Pro Wrestling from the commercial. There were also other new games that even the arcade players hadn't seen yet and weren't featured in the advertisements, such as Donkey Kong and Excite Bike. Excited, Robert asked the sales girl, "Can I get all of these?" The sales girl shook her head and explained, "I'm sorry, but you can only choose 2 game cartridges for free. However, if you want more, you can purchase additional game cartridges." Surprised, Robert inquired, "How much does each one cost?" The sales girl professionally introduced the prices of the game cartridges, saying, "Each game has its own price. For example, Donkey Kong costs about 5,500 yen, while this one is 5,000 yen. Robert nodded and said, "I'll take all 3. The store then packed his purchased console and games for him. He hurried back to his rented apartment and followed the instructions to connect the Kishin SKT Famicom to the TV. As soon as the TV and the console were up and running, Robert inserted the Donkey Kong cartridge into the Famicom. The familiar Donkey Kong theme played, and Robert couldn't contain his excitement as he started the game. The game began with the gorilla taking the princess, and the game character that resembled Mario. The gorilla started rolling big balls toward Mario, and Robert skillfully controlled Mario to dodge them. Robert found it unusually fun, but he still believed that Super Mario Bros. Was the most enjoyable. He couldn't help but smile. He proceeded to try out the other games and was not disappointed. He felt that it was worth the price, but the only drawback was that the in-game text was in Japanese. In several households, those who had purchased the Famicom enjoyed playing video games and were not disappointed by the excitement and joy it brought to their families. On the rented floor of Kishin, Shin oversaw the meeting that examined and discussed the report of the console and game sales. We sold approximately 7,000 Ctto consoles and 3,000 game cartridges in just one day. Li Han exclaimed in excitement, and then in astonishment, he added, Kishin made about 100 million yen from consoles alone and 17 million from game cartridges. The employees erupted in joy, celebrating the remarkable success. Myra was so excited that she hugged Shin in elation. Shin's expression appeared frozen for a moment. While he had expected success, he couldn't believe the astounding results. Did he really make this much money in such a short time? Excitement and adrenaline surged through his body. Myra noticed Shin's distant expression and grew concerned. Hey, Shin? Are you okay? Shin snapped out of his thoughts and nodded to Myra. They both joined the employees in celebrating. Shin enthusiastically declared, we invested at least 50 million yen to produce around 25,000 Ctto consoles. And thanks to our partnership with Torah Electronics, the benefits and discounts have tremendously benefited us. With this continued partnership, we can secure a consistent supply and keep producing Ctto consoles. Keep up the excellent work, everyone. The employees nodded in excitement. With that, Shin assigned tasks to the employees. Despite their desire to celebrate the company's success, Shin invited them to a celebration later, much to their surprise and delight. Let's go! They shouted enthusiastically, and Li Han, while feeling a bit tired from their youthful energy, was genuinely happy for the company. Shin and Myra entered a karaoke booth, while the other employees gathered around the restaurant to feast and celebrate. Some employees joined Shin in karaoke, and they all enjoyed beers in high spirits. Shin and Myra also indulged in some beers, given that Shin was now of legal drinking age. They were both overwhelmed with happiness. After the party concluded, Myra helped Shin back to their new rented apartment. Since they had become accustomed to living together, Shin decided to rent an apartment with Myra to save money. They lived together, but this time, they each had their own bed. However, Shin was quite drunk at this point, whereas Myra, with a higher alcohol tolerance, remained alert. Shin's intoxicated gaze lingered on Myra, making her feel embarrassed. Shin then caught Myra by surprise, embracing her and gently guiding her towards the bed. Wait, Shin! Myra initially wanted to resist, but Shin silenced her with a passionate kiss. Overwhelmed by the moment, Myra gradually yielded, returning Shin's embrace with equal fervor. Her hands explored his back, and for her, it felt like a dream come true. They spent the night wrapped in each other's arms. In Shin's apartment the next morning, he woke up feeling a chill in the air. He sat up abruptly, only to realize that he was completely unclothed. What's going on? His mind raced as he noticed another figure in his bed beneath the blankets. With a pounding heart, Shin carefully pulled back the covers and discovered a peacefully sleeping Myra, equally undressed. Shin's heart raced as he took in her nudity. He audibly gulped and shuddered. Could it be? Panic and realization struck him as he recalled the events of the previous night. Shin froze, but it wasn't a freeze born of sadness or irresponsibility. Instead, an overwhelming sense of joy washed over him. I'm no longer a virgin! Shin exclaimed in joyful disbelief. Myra was abruptly awakened by Shin's sudden movement and talking. As she opened her eyes, her gaze locked onto Shin's naked body, his private parts exposed rather proudly. What on earth? Anil, she exclaimed silently in her mind. Then, the realization hit her, and she became acutely aware of her own nakedness. She could feel the cool air brushing against her bare breasts and body as the blanket was pulled away by Shin. In a panic, Myra instinctively yanked the blanket back and covered herself, glaring at Shin. "Pervert! Back off, you jerk!" Shin, who had been lost in thought about the previous night, snapped back to reality, realizing that Myra had already covered herself. Feeling extremely awkward, he quietly slid out of the bed, only to notice a red stain on the otherwise white sheets. It looked like blood. Shin was initially puzzled, but then a sly grin crossed his face. "I've broken the ice." Meanwhile, Myra, her embarrassment overwhelming her, slowly remembered the events of the previous night. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Although she had a higher alcohol tolerance and more control than Shin, she couldn't deny that she had been a willing participant. She felt a pang of guilt but also noticed the discomfort in her private areas. She gritted her teeth, opting to remain silent, and covered herself tightly with the blanket. Chapter 33, Yakuza. After the incident, Shin and Myra found it awkward to be around each other. Going from close friends to suddenly having that kind of interaction was quite a leap. Because of this, Shin felt guilty and uncomfortable. He began, "Is everything going okay?" "I'm okay," Myra interrupted Shin, quickly heading to the bathroom. They had breakfast together before Myra hurriedly left, swaying. Shin could only shake his head and sigh. Myra was now in class, her mind still in a daze from what had happened. Her professor noticed her distant expression and asked if she was all right. Myra simply smiled and assured them that she was fine, but her face turned scarlet as she recalled the moments of her and Shin embracing. In a certain part of Tokyo near an airport, there stood a solitary, nondescript building. Inside, a shirtless man with a robust physique displayed a dragon tattoo on his back. Surrounding him were people dressed in formal black suits, showing utmost respect. The robust man gazed at the Kishin SKT Famicom in front of him and ordered, "Shady icon, please connect it to the TV." "Understood, Wakaga Shira," the man in the black suit, Ctto Nakamura, responded with a respectful bow as he connected the console to the television. Ctto Nakamura was a shady eye, associated with criminal groups and families, while the robust man with the dragon tattoo was the Wakaga Shira, Ryaji Nakajima. The television and console powered up, and Ryaji rested his chin on his hands, the little finger of his left hand visibly missing. The iconic Super Mario Bros. Theme filled the room. The respectful onlookers stood to the side, their eyes fixed on the Super Mario Bros. Game. Ryaji grabbed the controller and started playing the game. As he played, he found it much more captivating than the traditional video game machines he was accustomed to. He took a drag from his cigarette and crushed it underfoot before remarking, "No wonder our pachinko machines couldn't compete with these arcade machines. They're too entertaining, wouldn't you agree, Ctto Shady Eye?" Ctto bowed and replied, "Absolutely, Ryaji Wakaga Shira. In recent weeks, we've seen a significant decline in our pachinko machine revenues." Ryaji listened in silence, and Ctto's comrades admired his straightforwardness. Ryaji stood up, blowing smoke in Ctto's direction, and stated, "Intimidate those malls and stores under our influence. Promote our pachinko machines and buy those arcade machines at a reduced price." Ctto suppressed his discomfort at the odor of Ryaji's breath, bowing respectfully as he inquired, "Wakaga Shira-sama, I understand. But will arcade machines still be profitable with the rise of home gaming consoles?" Ryaji resumed playing the game, unfazed by Ctto's directness. He explained, "They will still be profitable. People who seek the social experience and want to play with others, especially students, will continue to visit arcades. And for those who can't yet afford the Kishin SKT console, they'll play at arcades." Ctto nodded in understanding and bowed respectfully. The other Shady Eye followed suit before Ryaji dismissed them. Afterward, the Shady Eye left the room, still stiff from the encounter. While Ryaji continued to play Super Mario, his phone suddenly rang. His expression shifted to seriousness as he noticed it was his boss's number, the Kumiko. The Kumiko held the second highest position in the Yamauchi family, just below the Oyabun in power. Shitai-sama, Ryaji greeted with deep respect. Is everything taken care of? Shitai Yamauchi asked, his voice carrying a deep and intimidating tone. Ryaji replied in a hurry, Shitai-sama, I've already given orders to the Shady Eye on what to do. Ensure you handle everything with utmost care, Shitai emphasized gravely. Ryaji quickly affirmed, I understand, Shitai-sama. Shitai continued, our pachinko and gasapon industry is suffering due to the emergence of the Kishin arcade machines. Ryaji could sense the concern in Shitai's voice, so he suggested, Shitai-sama, we could consider pressuring the Kishin company or even demanding money from them. His words were abruptly cut off as Shitai interjected urgently, no. We must maintain our moral standing within our family. Besides, we need to exercise caution since the Toshima ward is not directly under our control. Attacking another territory could lead to chaos. Ryaji felt somewhat helpless as he sighed and nodded, saying, I understand, Shitai-sama. On the other end of the phone, Shitai added, be cautious in your actions. A single misstep from you could bring about chaos, especially at a time when the government is eager to eradicate us. Ryaji nodded again, agreeing, yes, Shitai-sama. Afterward, Shitai ended the call, and Ryaji returned to his plush sofa seat. He glanced at the stolen Kishin arcade machines that his subordinates had secretly taken from the Toshima ward. Sitting in front of it, he resumed playing Super Mario Bros. At the arcade machine. Ctto was held in high regard by his fellow Shady Eye, and the thinner members of the group sighed in relief. One of them confessed, Woo, I'm always nervous when dealing with high-ranking Yakuza. Others nodded in agreement, saying, yeah, it feels like my heart is constantly in my throat. Did you notice the cut on his little finger of his left hand? I heard it's part of their strange ritual. So intimidating. Ctto paused and looked at his comrades, saying, if you're scared, you're not a true Shady Eye. His comrades came to an abrupt halt, freezing in their tracks. One of the Shady Eye nervously chimed in, hey, Ctto, I get that we're scared, but it's tough to hear those kinds of words from you. Ctto turned his gaze toward the person who spoke and replied, as a Shady Eye, you must be prepared to face either the best of times or the worst of times. In other words, you have to be ready for a life of prosperity or your own downfall. His words were icy and unyielding. The Shady Eye swallowed hard in response. It's not like any of us aspired to be Shady Eye in the first place, the slightly taller man retorted. Ctto regarded them coldly and asked, then why did you choose to become Shady Eye? It's not that we joined the Shady Eye to engage in wrongdoing. We had our own reasons. I joined because my sister is ill, another Shady Eye admitted. The others shared their motivations, saying, my father was too old to work, so I became a Shady Eye to support my family. I joined because my brother had an accident, and I needed money for his medical bills. Ctto listened solemnly before delivering his cold verdict, don't think for a moment that your reasons will earn my sympathy. From the moment you joined the Shady Eye, you signed up for these dirty jobs. Criminals and government law enforcement won't hesitate to eliminate you quietly or throw you behind bars. Consider yourself lucky if you end up in jail. That's why you must be cautious and precise. Mistakes can happen, but avoid the ones that could lead to your demise. Ctto's words remained unfeeling as he walked away. They had joined the Shady Eye group to provide for their families, but the criminals and government officials cared little about their obligations. As long as they made a single wrong move, their fate was sealed. The Shady Eye stared at Ctto's departing figure, feeling a mix of fear and increased respect for his harsh wisdom. Chapter 34, Torah Corporation Meeting. In various stores and malls across Japan, the Shady Eye spread fear by intimidating store owners and mall operators under the orders of Wakaga Shiraryaji. Japan is home to numerous Yakuza families, some with honorable reputations, and others with a history of violence and wrongdoing. While some managers resisted the Yakuza's demands, others complied. However, those who dared to resist soon found their machines destroyed, incurring significant losses. The sales of Kishin SKT continued to surge, and the revenue generated by Kishin reached unprecedented heights. At the Torah Corporation headquarters, Asahi Tanaka convened a meeting with the board of directors. He presented the estimated earnings of the Kishin Sky Famicom to the directors. As you can see, in just 2 days, the sales of Kishin SKT Famicom alone have already generated at least 70 million, according to our estimates. It could even be more, but one thing is certain, this is a highly profitable venture, Asahi confidently stated. Initially, he had always wanted to present this business idea, but he lacked proof of its true profitability. The board of directors listened attentively and were visibly impressed. One director inquired, "If Chairman Tanaka is presenting us with such an opportunity, are you suggesting we explore a similar business?" The curiosity of the other directors was piqued as well. Chairman Asahi Tanaka nodded and replied, "Indeed. At the very least, I have plans to explore this opportunity." Another director chimed in, "But the product is already licensed and protected by copyright law. Somehow, I think we can find a way to imitate it and avoid legal consequences," someone else mused. "That's an intriguing thought," said another director. However, Asahi shook his head at their assumption. "No, my intention is to acquire the Kishin company and make it a subsidiary of Torah Corporation," he explained, a smile playing on his lips. The directors chuckled, and one of them commented, "That's an even better idea." "I hadn't considered that," another director admitted with a chuckle. "But will they agree to sell? Given their current revenue, they may not be inclined to," inquired another director. Asahi Tanaka's expression turned serious. "The Kishin company is currently a customer of our subsidiary, Torah Electronics. They don't even have their own components to manufacture their products. So, if they resist selling, we can apply pressure through contract negotiations. We can also wait for the current contracts to expire and cease supplying them," he articulated firmly. However, another director raised a concern, saying, "Kishin company could turn to Suzuki Electronics if we pursue that course." "Yes, Suzuki Electronics is the leading electronic company in Japan, they can readily become Kishin's new supplier. If Kishin does this, they might seek out other partners, such as Suzuki Electronics, which would result in losing a significant customer and revenue," another director added. "I believe such a plan is risky and ill-considered, Chairman Tanaka." "This doesn't seem like your usual approach," quipped a portly man, Jin Mashita, who held the position of vice chairman and possessed 10% of the voting rights. While 10% may seem relatively small, it represented a substantial 300 billion yen in shares within the corporation, valued at 3 trillion yen. In contrast, Chairman Tanaka held 26% of the voting rights, equivalent to a significant 800 billion yen. Chairman Tanaka responded to the vice chairman with a smile, saying, "Actually, I wouldn't typically consider such a move, but when I delved into the background of the individual who owns Kishin company and discovered his true identity, I was rather astonished." The directors and the vice chairman became intrigued, and someone inquired, "Oh, I wonder who he is. He must possess a wealth of experience." "Yes, and he appears to have the spirit of an entrepreneur." Vice Chairman Jin Mashita asked, "Could you please reveal his identity, Chairman Tanaka?" Chairman Asahi Tanaka paused momentarily and then disclosed, "He happens to be the youngest son of the Suzuki Group's chairman, and his name is Shinro Suzuki." He retrieved a photograph from his pocket and placed it on the table for the board of directors to examine. However, it appeared that the directors and the vice chairman had missed his verbal announcement, as they were now fixated on the photograph. The vice chairman gazed at the picture and expressed his surprise at the youthfulness of the individual. "He looks remarkably young. My own son might be older than him," chimed in another director. Is he genuinely the owner of Kishin Company? The vice chairman asked, still harboring doubts. Chairman Asahi Tanaka nodded in affirmation. Wait, did you say he is the youngest son of the Suzuki Group's chairman? Vice Chairman Jin realized the significance of this and asked in a state of shock. The board of directors turned their attention to Chairman Asahi Tanaka with evident surprise. Chairman Suzuki confirmed, indeed, that's correct. He is Shiro Suzuki's youngest son, Shinro Suzuki. I only became aware of this because I happened to catch a TV interview. I saw half of his face, and then my son mentioned that the person who owns Kishin Company is Shinro Suzuki. So, I initiated an investigation to confirm it, Chairman Tanaka explained. Another director expressed surprise, saying, how did you recognize the face of the Suzuki Group's chairman's youngest son, Chairman Tanaka? Many people in Japan may share the same name. Yes, and there are rumors that the Suzuki Group chairman's least favorite son is the youngest one. That's just hearsay. The directors engaged in a discussion. I recognized his face because I attended business gatherings in Tokyo, and on one occasion, I saw the youngest son of the Suzuki family. During that event, when I conversed with the chairman of the Suzuki Group, he seemed to be disregarding two of his sons, including Shinro Suzuki, Chairman Asahi Tanaka explained. Oh, now I recall. That gathering took place a year ago. I'm surprised you remembered, Chairman, Vice Chairman Jin Mashita remarked, scratching his head. But even so, he's still a member of the Suzuki family, which makes it more likely for him to have Suzuki Electronics Supply Kishin Company, Vice Chairman Jin Mashita added. The board of directors nodded in agreement, and another director chimed in, indeed. If Kishin were truly a company backed by the Suzuki Group, our attempts to pressure them would likely prove futile. However, Chairman Asahi Tanaka shook his head, countering, no. According to our investigation, Shinro had a falling out with his father. When the youngest son established a company under the Suzuki Group, his father swiftly disbanded it without hesitation. This forced Shinro to become independent and establish his current Kishin Company, he explained, tapping the table with his fingers for emphasis. Vice Chairman Jin Mashita voiced doubt, saying, what if it's merely a ruse orchestrated by the Suzuki Group? What if it's all for a show? How else could Kishin Company have achieved such remarkable growth in just 3 months since its founding? The board of directors nodded in agreement. Yes, what if it's all part of the Suzuki Group's plan? Another director added. Chairman Asahi Tanaka remained in contemplative silence for a moment before speaking with a serious expression, you all make valid points, but based on my intuition, I don't believe that's the case. However, I acknowledge that it's merely a gut feeling on my part. That's why I've brought this matter to all of you for discussion. As the board of directors nodded, Chairman Asahi Tanaka continued, if we can't acquire Kishin, we can always explore the option of buying the rights or becoming a licensee, allowing us to manufacture our own consoles. One of the directors raised a question, asking, do you think they would agree to sell us the rights or grant us a license? Chairman Asahi Tanaka smiled and replied, they would profit if we become their licensee, but I doubt they would sell the rights. However, we can strategize to maximize our profits while minimizing potential losses. He pondered the possibilities, considering ways to secure the most advantageous outcome. Chapter 35, Asahi's Reminder. The Kishin SKT Famicom continued to make waves in Tokyo, drawing the attention of numerous companies and corporations. Even in the prestigious Minato Ward's Azabuya district, where the Suzuki Group's main headquarters was located, the unique and striking design of the building didn't go unnoticed. However, it was inside the meeting hall of the Suzuki Group building that the topic of discussion was the unexpected rise of a relatively small company, Kishin. As a conglomerate, it was unusual for a corporate giant like Suzuki Group to be intrigued by a small player like Kishin. Nevertheless, the word about Kishin was spreading across Tokyo, and the increasing sales of the Kishin SKT Famicom were causing envy among smaller electronic companies. The phenomenon even piqued the interest of industry giants like Torah and Suzuki. People from various parts of Japan, including Osaka, Yokohama, and Nagoya, started to hear about Kishin and its captivating video game machines. This led them to travel to Tokyo, either to enjoy the arcades or to purchase the Kishin SKT Famicom for themselves. As a result, Kishin's sales skyrocketed, prompting the company to ramp up production. Chairman Shiro Suzuki sat at the head of the board of directors, attentively listening to Nico Tabata, the CEO of Suzuki Electronics, who was presenting the trends of Kishin SKT Famicom across Tokyo. Once Nico Tabata concluded his presentation, the board of directors erupted into a lively discussion. Shiro Suzuki, however, was not feeling well about the subject, particularly because it revolved around video games, something that had adversely affected his son's future. Despite his discomfort, he concealed his emotions. In this setting, among the board of directors, he had to exercise caution and safeguard his image. Losing his composure here would be detrimental to his reputation. One of the directors, a middle-aged man with black hair and features resembling Shiro's, wearing a smile, asked, "What do you think, Chairman?" This was Vice Chairman Ctto Suzuki, Shiro's younger brother. Shiro Suzuki's composure wavered, and his facial expression twitched. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth but refrained from reacting aggressively. Instead, he maintained a strained smile and replied thoughtfully, "It's indeed a highly profitable business. I can't fathom how such a small company achieved this, especially when the video game industry was expected to decline long ago." Vice Chairman Ctto Suzuki, however, didn't back down. He knowingly prodded further, "I recall your youngest son's interest in video games. He must be aware of this, right?" The mention of Shinro, Shiro's youngest son, caused Shiro to visibly struggle with his anger. His expression betrayed his irritation, and he seemed on the verge of slamming the table. Yet, he restrained himself, clenching his fists and biting back his fury. His eyes gleamed with a hint of malice as he glared at his younger brother. Undaunted, Vice Chairman Ctto Suzuki met his elder brother's gaze head-on, showing no fear. Inwardly, he reveled in provoking his brother. As the board of directors turned their attention back to Shiro Suzuki, they bombarded him with various questions. Shiro, gradually letting go of his anger, responded to their inquiries. Finally, an employee brought the Kishin Famicom console into the meeting hall, capturing the curiosity of everyone present. They also set up a classic 1990s small television and connected the Kishin SKT Famicom to it for a closer look. Following the employees' demonstration of the Kishin SKT console, the board of directors resumed their fervent discussion. They contemplated a strategy similar to that of Torah Corporation, albeit with the distinction that they lacked direct contact with the Kishin company. Amidst the board of directors' disagreements, Chairman Asahi Tanaka ultimately arrived at a decision, not to exert pressure on the Kishin company. The risk was simply too great. If the board of directors were correct in their suspicions and this was all part of a larger Suzuki Group scheme, there could be a deeper plan at play that might lead to significant losses for Torah Corporation. Consequently, the notion of replicating the Kishin SKT Famicom was also dismissed. While the idea of imitating a successful product was tempting, it might prove to be a trap set by the Suzuki Group, potentially resulting in substantial losses. Chairman Asahi Tanaka found himself in a candid conversation with his younger son, Kenji Tanaka, at the Tanaka Grand Mansion. In the comfort of their home rather than the workplace, Asahi Tanaka spoke more informally, choosing to share important information with his son. The Suzuki Group has deep roots in Japan, and they even have connections in the underworld. So, we need to exercise caution when considering any plans involving a company that may have ties to the Suzuki Group, Chairman Asahi Tanaka advised Kenji. After informing his son that the owner of the Kishin company was the son of the Suzuki Group's chairman, he believed it was essential to keep Kenji informed. Kenji expressed his disdain to the underworld, saying, "I thought the government was already working to eliminate those criminals. Chairman Asahi Tanaka sighed and responded, "Indeed, but some powerful ones still remain. Do you remember that card game company?" he asked, prompting Kenji to recall the situation. Kenji was taken aback by his father's question and responded, "Was it that Nintendo Kopai in Kyoto?" he inquired. Chairman Asahi Tanaka nodded and began to explain, "Yes, indeed. That game card company initially invested a significant amount of money in arcades. However, when the video game industry declined, it faced financial challenges and eventually shifted its focus to producing toys and game cards. Since gambling was prohibited in Japan by the government, they encountered further difficulties. But they came up with an idea. They created card games featuring licensed American cartoon characters and exploited a legal loophole, allowing them to resume game card production without being associated with gambling." He provided this explanation in a series of words. Kenji was puzzled and asked, "What does this have to do with the underworld?" Chairman Asahi Tanaka smiled at his son and replied, "Their game cards became popular among Yakuza members." Kenji's eyes widened in surprise. "Then, why do we have any dealings with a company like that? Is Aunt Narumi okay there?" Kenji questioned, clearly shocked. He remembered visiting the traditional Japanese mansion of Nintendo Kopai's owner and touring the toy and game card factory with his father when he was just a teenager. At the time, he was quite clueless about the situation, but he recalled that his aunt was married to the owner of Nintendo Kopai. "Don't worry, Kenji. Your aunt is safe there. Besides, Nintendo itself isn't a Yakuza organization but simply has connections with them," Asahi reassured his son. "How can that be okay?" Kenji couldn't comprehend how his father remained calm while discussing such matters. Asahi smiled and explained, "Kenji, you have to understand that Yakuza can be divided into good ones and bad ones. Some Yakuza families engage in legitimate businesses, while others are involved in illicit activities. It's essential to steer clear of the shady ones, but it's acceptable to have connections with the honorable ones." "How can we even determine that?" Kenji asked in surprise. Asahi simply smiled and remarked, "You'll realize it's not a problem when you feel comfortable around them." Kenji couldn't help but smirk and playfully teased, "Old man, you're quite unpredictable." Since they were in a more relaxed setting at home, there was no need for formality. His father, Asahi Tanaka, responded with a knowing smile. Chapter 36, No Deal. Shin was engrossed in his plans for the company, while Myra hadn't spoken to him in a while due to the awkwardness lingering in their relationship after the recent incident. Feeling helpless about the situation, Shin let out a sigh. Just then, Lee Han suddenly entered his office in a hurry and exclaimed, "Mr. Suzuki, someone from Torah Corporation wants to purchase the rights to Kishin Skt Famicom." Startled, Shin quickly stood up and inquired, "They want to buy the license for our Kishin Skt Famicom?" Lee Han approached Shin and clarified, "Yes, a secretary from the chairman of Torah Corporation wishes to discuss the possibility of acquiring the license for Kishin Skt Famicom." Shin stroked his chin in intrigue, letting out a small chuckle. "Do they genuinely believe we'd sell our license?" "Absolutely not." Lee Han had anticipated Shin's response and proceeded to convey the secretary's message from Torah Corp. "She's interested in having a conversation with you. She understands that you're unlikely to agree outright, so she hopes to discuss terms that could benefit both parties," Lee Han explained. Shin nodded, and Lee Han led him to a nearby cafe close to their rented building. As they headed there, Shin contemplated the inconvenience of having to go to a cafe outside the building for a quality coffee. He entertained the idea of purchasing a building and setting up a cafe for his employees. The unique aspect would be that the cafe would belong to him, and the profits from it, generated by his employees' patronage, would go straight into his pocket. Moreover, he planned to offer more affordable coffee at his cafe. Ruka Ishida was seated in the cafe, peacefully sipping her latte. She then retrieved some papers, the terms and conditions set by Torah Corporation for acquiring the rights to Kishin's Famicom or becoming a licensee. The cafe's door made a sound as two men entered. Ruka quickly glanced at the entrance and recognized the middle-aged man she had contacted earlier. Following him was a younger man, even younger than her brother. She promptly stood up, and after the two men formally bowed to her, she returned the gesture with even more respect. She extended her hand for a handshake, and the young man reciprocated. She introduced herself. "Nice to meet you, I'm Ruka Ishida, the secretary of the chairman of Torah Corporation. I'm the one responsible for this negotiation." The young man nodded and introduced himself. "Nice to meet you, I'm Shinro Suzuki, the CEO of Kishin Electronics," as he took his seat. Ruka couldn't help but be surprised by how young the Kishin CEO was. Li Han didn't join them at the table. Instead, he bowed and left the cafe. A server approached Shin to take his order, and he requested a courtado. When he went to pay, Ruka stopped him and covered the bill. Shin smiled in gratitude and settled into the soft seat. He looked directly into Ruka's eyes and said, "Thank you." Ruka smiled back and met Shin's gaze. "No problem. I initiated this meeting, so I can only do so much," she replied, alluding to the inconvenience she had caused. "I heard that Torah Corporation wants to buy the license for our Famicom." Shin inquired with a smile. "Yes, and we expected your rejection. But we're open to becoming a licensee to produce similar game console machines," Ruka explained as she handed over the papers. Shin read the document and frowned. He responded seriously, "Do you think I'd agree to these terms? Only a 2% royalty for using our technology and including our games." Ruka hurriedly explained, "Please, Mr. Suzuki, let's stay calm. We're offering 50 billion yen up front as an incentive." Shin slammed the paper onto the table, exclaiming, "There's no need to consider that. Don't underestimate me." He stood up, facing Ruka. "Tell your boss I'd never agree to these terms in a million years." Ruka looked helpless, and as she saw Shin about to leave, she retorted, "Don't be so arrogant. You should be grateful for the opportunity to negotiate with Torah Corporation." Her outburst drew the attention of the cafe's other customers. Shin stopped in his tracks, glanced back at her, and retorted, "You're the one making the request, why should I be grateful?" He snorted and headed for the exit. Gritting her teeth, Ruka shouted, "Torah Corporation can easily create similar products to what you're selling." Shin continued walking and waved dismissively. He turned his head and mocked, "Should I get a bonus for pretending to care?" Before exiting the cafe. Once Shin had left, Ruka's annoyed expression transformed into a satisfied smile. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number. "It's done," she reported. A middle-aged man's voice on the other end responded, "Good work. I'll give you a raise." Ruka smiled and said, "Thank you, Vice Chairman." Vice Chairman Jin grinned. Ruka was a spy he had placed within Chairman Tanaka's circle. He had intentionally allowed Ruka to present the terms paper in an absurd manner, knowing it would enrage the CEO of Kishin Electronics. His objective was to push Chairman Tanaka into a corner, forcing him to create similar products to those of Kishin. In doing so, he hoped to ensnare Chairman Tanaka and lead him into a trap set by the Suzuki group behind Kishin. However, unbeknownst to him, his efforts were in vain. He, along with the board of directors, including Chairman Tanaka, were overthinking matters related to Kishin. Chapter 37, Finally, we will acquire a building. After returning to his office, Li Han, who was with Shin, saw that Shin had declined Torah Corp's offer. He asked, "Are the terms absurd?" Shin nodded as he sat down, "Forget about it." Then he said, "Recap the recent events in the company." Shin was busy planning for the company and instructing the group of programmers at Kishin Trademark about their upcoming games. Li Han nodded and took a deep breath. He continued, "The Kishin SKT Famicom sales have been off the charts. We've accumulated 800 million yen in just a few days after its initial release. He couldn't hide the trembling in his voice. Shin paused, shocked even though he had expected it. He had been just a loyal employee of a certain game company named Math Algebra in his previous life, a company everyone expressed their hatred for. Now, he had transformed into a wealthy, handsome young man. Shin took a deep breath and forced himself to remain calm. That's great. Raise the salaries of the competent employees, Shin said as his hands touched each other in obvious excitement, his fingers twirling around each other. Li Han didn't show his boss's excitement. In fact, he felt grateful to serve such a boss, young yet promising, capable and responsible, and also generous. He even thought about offering his daughter in South Korea to his benevolent boss, but it seemed that his young boss already had a relationship with Ctto Myra. All right, Li Han replied as he was about to walk out, but then Shin added something else. Also, handle the procedures for us to acquire a building for our company, Shin said hurriedly. Li Han stopped in his tracks and faced his boss with a hint of surprise. Are we finally acquiring a building? Li Han was filled with excitement. After all, Shin was currently renting a floor in someone else's building. Whenever they entered the building, they encountered unfamiliar faces from other small companies also renting floors there. Now that Shin was growing rapidly, news of their success had spread among the other companies in the building. Employees from those companies either expressed interest in joining Shin or went out of their way to curry favor with Shin's employees, including Li Han, hoping to make connections. Fortunately, Shin didn't experience too much of this attention, as many considered him too young to be associated with Shin. Shin chuckled at Li Han's excitement and teased, "You seem even more excited than I am." Li Han nodded eagerly, "You may not know, Mr. Suzuki, but we've been dealing with people from other small companies renting floors in this building. It's been quite a hassle." Li Han chuckled, fully aware of the situation, and added, "Is that so? Then all the more reason for us to acquire our own building." Li Han nodded and inquired, "In which ward should we look for a building, Mr. Suzuki?" Shin pondered for a moment, rubbing his chin, and replied, "For now, even as we continue to grow, we still can't afford a building in prosperous areas like Minato, Chiyoda, or Chuo Ward, considering the high land prices per square meter there. So, let's search for an affordable building here in Toshima Ward." Li Han had expected this response. Given their current financial situation, purchasing land per square meter in upscale areas like Minato or Roppongi would cost between 500,000 to 1.5 million yen. Additionally, have the purchased building modified to include a cafe within the premises. We can also include entertainment areas such as karaoke, arcades, a gym, and even a restaurant. This way, our employees won't have to travel far for these amenities. We don't mind spending a bit more on these facilities, Shin added after careful consideration. Li Han was pleasantly surprised and remarked, "Mr. Suzuki, you're incredibly generous to your employees." Shin shook his head and said, "Not at all. Employees will still have to pay for these services, but it'll be more affordable." Li Han nodded, but he couldn't help feeling that Shin was exceptionally kind. Although Shin wanted to maintain control of the company, it was evident that he was genuinely considerate and generous toward the employees. Shin noticed Li Han's expression and chuckled, saying, "Listen, I may not treat my employees like family, but I do treat them like people. They deserve these kinds of perks." Li Han was a bit surprised by Shin's straightforwardness, especially since most bosses he had encountered tended to use phrases like "we treat our employees like family." Why is it that Mr. Suzuki doesn't think of it that way? Li Han asked out of curiosity, as this was quite different from his usual experiences. Shin smiled and replied, "If I were to say that I treat my employees like family, it would mean I'm a hypocrite. I'm responsible for many employees, but I won't pretend we're a family. Let me put it this way, would you believe me if I said I treat them like family and then promptly fired an employee for incompetence?" Li Han smiled, understanding the point Shin was making. He had indeed encountered such bosses in the past. For me, I'll fire an incompetent employee without hesitation. Hard-working and competent employees deserve raises, while lazy and incompetent ones should be let go, Shin explained with a smile. In Li Han's eyes, Shin's demeanor was both stern and kind simultaneously. Li Han was slowly gaining insight into Shin's personality. He realized that Shin wasn't overly kind or cruel, instead, he was fair. Li Han saw nothing wrong with this approach, especially considering that Shin did not tolerate excessive overtime. He had implemented a rule at Kishin, ensuring employees did not overwork themselves and encouraging them to go home after their designated work hours. Moreover, employees still received raises within those hours. This approach made Kishin a beloved company among its employees, especially in Japan, where excessive overworking and mistreatment had become alarmingly common. I'll go search for the right building in Toshima Ward now, Li Han bowed respectfully to Shin and then walked out of the room. I'll go search for the right building in Toshima Ward now, Li Han bowed respectfully to Shin and then walked out of the room. As Li Han exited the room, Shin's phone rang. Glancing at the screen, he noticed it was his younger sister, Rookie Suzuki. A smile formed on his face, remembering that she was the only one who had genuinely supported the previous owner of this body. Shin answered the call by tapping the answer button on the Suzuki phone's keyboard. Chapter 38, Price Gouging. How are you, Sister Rookie? Shin asked with a smile over the phone. On the other end of the line, in Rookie's spacious room adorned with movie posters, she reclined on her neatly decorated bed. She clutched a large teddy bear close to her and held the phone to her right ear. Rookie, a beautiful young lady with black hair, a fine nose, and a fit physique, gazed at the television connected to the Kishin Ctto Famicom. On the TV screen, Super Mario Bros. Was paused mid-game. She had called her brother to discuss this new phenomenon called the Kishin Ctto Famicom and its games, well aware of her brother's lifelong fascination with such things. The phone was answered, and Rookie heard a voice she hadn't heard in months. How are you, Sister Rookie? Rookie smiled and replied, I'm doing fine. I should be the one asking, how are you after becoming independent? Shin, on the other end of the line, smiled and said, it was tough at first, but as I've gradually gotten used to it, I'm more than fine. Rookie smiled faintly and apologized, I'm sorry if I wasn't able to call you earlier when you first became independent. I was finishing a novel with a tight deadline. Shin, understanding, responded, no, it's okay. I know you're a novelist, so I understand how busy you must be with research and all. Grateful for his understanding, Rookie continued, do you know that a popular video game is slowly taking over all of Tokyo? Shin remained silent for a moment, so Rookie added, I know you're fascinated with video games. You'll be really excited when you play them. Shin, on the other end of the phone, finally said, Really? Rookie nodded enthusiastically, really. From my research, the company that started these popular video games is called Kishin Electronics. They began in arcades by placing their machines in the arcade sections of stores and malls around Tokyo. Curious, Rookie asked, you must have heard about this by now. Are you in Tokyo? Shin hesitated but then awkwardly replied, Yes, I'm in Tokyo. Really? Where are you? I'll personally give you the Famicom I just bought. Rookie offered, thinking that Shin might not be able to afford it. No need, sister, Shin replied. Sensing that Shin might be declining out of pride, Rookie suggested, you can slowly pay me back for it. It's all right. Shin, feeling a bit helpless, admitted, actually, I already have one, sister. Rookie was a bit surprised and said, really? But she couldn't help but feel a hint of doubt. She wondered if Shin was just saying that to spare her feelings and avoid accepting her gift. On the other end of the phone, Shin could sense Rookie's doubt. Despite his reassurances, Rookie ultimately decided not to push Shin to accept her gift. They continued their conversation, discussing various topics like video games, movies, and Rookie's novel. As their conversation flowed, Rookie genuinely expressed her concern for Shin and even suggested he come back home. However, Shin reassured her once more. They continued to talk, reconnecting as siblings do. After a while, they said their goodbyes and ended the call. Shin returned his phone to his pocket with a smile. Meanwhile, in a building standing alone in an area without other structures, near a certain airport in Tokyo, a Yakuza family's building was bustling with activity. Inside, Wakaga Shiraryaji was inspecting a large stockpile of Kishin SKT Famicom consoles. Shate Sato stood respectfully beside him, with other Shate members standing behind them, displaying a mix of fear and respect. "You've done well, Sato Shate-kun. With these, we'll make a substantial profit," Ryaji exclaimed with a wide grin, gesturing towards the unopened boxes of Kishin SKT Famicom consoles. Ryaji had acquired a considerable quantity of these consoles with the intention of reselling them at a premium price in other cities. Sato nodded in agreement, adding, "Our decision was the right one, Wakaga Shira. Demand for this product is high in cities like Osaka, Yokohama, Kyoto, and Nagoya." Ryaji Wakaga Shira grinned, revealing his yellowed teeth. Back at his own place, Shin contemplated how to mend his strained relationship with Myra. He was far from a dull guy. In his previous life, his busy schedule left him without any romantic relationships, rendering him both a virgin and childless. His parents would occasionally draw unfavorable comparisons between him and his childhood friends who had already started families with beautiful wives. Each time, these comparisons inflicted emotional damage that cut deep. However, things had changed now. With Myra, he had broken through that barrier, transforming from a virgin into a person who had experienced intimate connection. Their relationship had evolved, moving beyond mere friendship to something more profound. After the incident, Myra no longer visited his apartment. Instead, she moved to a different one, coincidentally situated close to Shin's place. As a result, Shin decided to pay her a visit. Shin pressed the button on her doorbell, and it chimed through the hallway. Myra eventually opened the door, but her reaction was one of surprise when she saw Shin standing there. Unfazed, Shin greeted her with a warm smile. "Hey, can I come in?" He wore that smile without a hint of awkwardness, having overcome the events of a few days ago. Myra, however, seemed distracted and replied with a snort, "What do you want?" Ignoring her dismissive tone, Shin responded with straightforward confidence, "Didn't you hear, dear? Invite me in." Chapter 39, Love. A little R18. Myra bit her lower lip and retorted, "Who are you calling dear?" Shin smiled, "Come on, just let me in. I've brought chocolate and your favorite donut," he said, holding boxes of donuts and a chocolate bar taped to them. "I don't need it," Myra replied, poised to slam the door shut. However, Shin intercepted the door, leaving Myra feeling helpless. "Get away," she said coldly. Sighing, Shin gently forced his way into her apartment. "Why are you acting like this? We were both drunk, and it's nobody's fault. Why are you so upset about it?" he asked, his tone filled with helplessness. Myra gritted her teeth and retorted, "It means a lot to me. My chastity was supposed to be cherished until I'm married, but you..." Her voice trailed off, and she couldn't help but tear up. She blamed everything on Shin, even though she knew she was at fault as well. In fact, she had made the biggest mistake by allowing Shin to take advantage of her. Shin observed Myra as she closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. He shook his head in helplessness, aware that this wouldn't be easy. Gently, he reached out and wiped the tears from her cheeks and eyes. Myra pulled away, her own hand wiping away the remaining tears from her eyes. "I know what I did was outrageous. I'm here to repair our relationship," Shin said as he approached her. "My parents will be furious if they find out." Myra said sadly, her hands covering her eyes, tears still trickling down. Unable to hold back, Shin gently placed the box of donuts on a nearby table and rushed to Myra, embracing her tightly. Myra was taken aback initially, wanting to pull away, but Shin held her firmly, and she couldn't help but surrender to his embrace. Shin cradled her head, his fingers gently combing through her hair. He whispered into Myra's right ear, "To show my love, I will marry you." Myra's sad expression transformed into shock, her eyes widening in disbelief. Are you telling the truth?" Her voice trembled with astonishment. Shin nodded and released his hold, gazing directly into Myra's eyes from up close. Their faces were now so near that Myra felt a slight flush, but after the events of the past few days, she was less flustered than usual. With unwavering determination, Shin continued, "I'm serious. I will marry you." She looked directly into Shin's eyes and expressed her worries, even though you are so successful and wealthy now. Even when you are still young and much younger than me, and there are countless girls out there, more beautiful and younger than me, who would chase after you. Will you still marry me?" Myra stammered, her gaze dropping to the floor. She couldn't meet Shin's eyes anymore. She felt inferior, as if she weren't worthy of him. Her anger over what had happened was compounded by this deep-seated insecurity that had been gnawing at her. She had convinced herself that if she were in a relationship with Shin, he would eventually tire of her and replace her with someone better. She feared that any connection she had with him would remain shallow, stuck as mere friends with benefits, with no possibility of a deeper bond. But now, with Shin actually proposing marriage, Myra was torn between happiness and anxiety. She was happy but also concerned about the future they would share, always worrying that someone with better looks would come along and take her place in Shin's heart. Shin noticed a mix of happiness and deep worry in Myra's eyes. Determined to reassure her, he spoke sincerely, "Don't worry. You're the only one for me. That's why I want to marry you." He sensed Myra's lingering concerns, so he reached for her chin, gently lifting her face to meet his gaze. "Even though there might be younger and more beautiful girls out there, in my eyes, there's only you," Shin said with sincerity reflected in his eyes and voice. Myra locked eyes with him, captivated by his genuine words. Her worries began to melt away as she felt the warmth of his sincerity. Unable to contain her emotions, she tiptoed and kissed Shin's soft lips briefly. The unexpected kiss caught Shin off guard, leaving him momentarily stunned. Myra had unintentionally recreated the passionate kiss they shared a few nights ago, even daring to explore his mouth with her tongue before realizing her mistake. Blushing with embarrassment, she quickly pulled away, avoiding Shin's gaze. However, Shin soon regained his composure and looked deeply into Myra's eyes. He firmly held her shoulders and guided her face back to meet his, taking the initiative to kiss her tenderly on the lips. Myra initially resisted but eventually succumbed to Shin's kiss and his gentle embrace. They shared a passionate kiss, and afterward, they exchanged knowing glances. Shin then eagerly carried her to her bedroom without her objection. There, they no longer restrained their fiery desires and gave in to their profound love for each other, indulging in the pure pleasure they found in each other's company. In the darkness, Shin resembled an awakened beast, empowered with newfound vigor. Myra, on the other hand, seemed like an angel who had fallen into the embrace of a wild creature. Her eyes reflected a mix of joy, initially tinged with sadness and worry. Her unclothed form lay atop Shin's own bare body. She settled herself on him, their movements synchronized, but Shin moved with even greater intensity, intensifying the sensations they both shared. Early in the morning, both Shin and Myra awoke feeling sore all over their bodies. Shin rose early, while Myra remained peacefully asleep. He couldn't help but reflect on the exercise they'd shared, which left his muscles pleasantly fatigued. A smile graced Shin's face as he felt Myra's nude body nestled against his own. He savored the sensation of her gentle touch and their shared passion, he can still feel her breast and erected nipples gracing his skin. Shin felt a deep sense of gratitude to the Almighty. He felt grateful to God for his new life and couldn't thank the divine enough. Chapter 40, Kishin's Rise. Shin gazed at the building before him. Located in Toshima Ward, his company had acquired the building for a reasonable 140 million yen, a relatively low price for Tokyo Prefecture. Despite its modest appearance, Shin had plans to renovate it and establish a cafe and a small restaurant on one of its floors. The Kishin employees observed their new workplace with excitement. To them, this marked a fresh start in a realm of possibilities. The sales of Kishin SKT Famicom continued to soar at a remarkable pace. Some opportunistic companies engaged in price gouging, akin to Yakuza families vying for more Kishin SKT Famicom units. As a result, the sales of Kishin SKT Famicom kept climbing without showing any signs of slowing down. Meanwhile, within the main headquarters of Torah Corp, in the office of the chairman and CEO, Asahi Tanaka sat deep in thought. Facing him was a young adult with blonde hair, Idari Tanaka, his elder son and the current CEO of Torah Electronics. In my opinion, there's no issue in emulating such a lucrative product. Our electronic technology team has already devised a way to avoid copyright infringement. There's nothing to be concerned about, Idari calmly stated. He continued confidently, furthermore, we can potentially outperform Kishin's products with superior specifications. We can also hire numerous programmers to develop games for our hardware. We can commence mass production of our video game console imitations to meet the demand in the new market. Asahi nodded but expressed his worry, I'm aware of that. I'm concerned, though, that this might be a trap set by the Suzuki Group. Idari appeared puzzled by his father's concerns and asked, Chairman, what exactly worries you? Even if it is a trap, we can be prepared. Asahi shook his head and elaborated, I'm concerned that the Suzuki Group foresaw this move and that Shinro deliberately rejected our proposal as part of their trap. My suspicion is that their trap might unfold like this: when we begin mass production of a similar product with better specs, Suzuki Electronics under the Suzuki Group might suddenly introduce an even superior product with access to Kishin games. This could potentially render our imitation product unsellable until then. Idari nodded, understanding the gravity of his father's words. Don't worry, Chairman. We'll find out soon enough when we receive information from our spy within the board of directors, Idari reassured Asahi. Asahi nodded silently. In just about 2 weeks since the launch of Kishin SKT Famicom, the revenue of Kishin Electronics had already reached an impressive 2.8 billion yen. Game cartridge sales alone had reached at least 700 million yen, a notable achievement considering Kishin had only released a few games thus far. With this surge in revenue, Kishin was actively expanding its workforce and increasing production capacity to meet market demand. The video game console market resembled a blank canvas, and Kishin had firmly established its dominance with no competitors in sight. Major companies like Suzuki, Toyota, Torah, and others could only watch helplessly as Kishin SKT Famicom sales and production continued to rise. As more units entered stores and malls across Tokyo, the demand showed no signs of abating. Kishin expanded its reach to neighboring cities, securing deals with stores and malls, which kept the retail division of Kishin exceptionally busy. The Kishin brand gradually gained recognition throughout Tokyo, with their video games and Famicom consoles steadily gaining popularity in the city. As the demand for our Famicom consoles grows, so does the demand for video games, Lee Han explained, detailing Kishin's sales figures and the potential video game market. We've already recruited numerous programmers at Kishin, Shin said with a smile. They've developed a few games, including Contra from My Vision Plan and a game of their own creation, Snake. However, this alone hasn't significantly boosted our game cartridge sales. While the company is expanding, we've managed to address the issue of Famicom shortages. However, our game cartridge sales have fallen behind because customers appear content with Super Mario Bros. Therefore, we must prioritize cost-effective marketing and promotion strategies to boost our video game sales without overspending. The Kishin employees fell silent, pondering the situation. One of them suggested, perhaps we can promote our products through flyers or allocate more funds for in-store and mall promotions. Additionally, we could consider contracting a top celebrity for endorsements. The employees nodded in agreement, but as the company's rapid rise and soaring revenue had led to complacency, their suggestions began to sound naive and impractical. We can sign contracts with many national top celebrities, or better yet, international top celebrities, and have them promote our products for at least several months. Yeah, securing contracts for at least a year. The employees turned to Shin for confirmation but were met with his cold expression. They didn't quite understand, but Shin suddenly spoke in a frosty tone, "Is that your suggestion?" The employee who had made the suggestion felt a pang of fear, and the others shared a similar feeling. He nodded hastily. "I'm disappointed in all of you," Shin said with a cold gaze, his eyes scanning each of the employees. Beside him, Li Han felt helpless, witnessing how these top employees had grown complacent and arrogant in just a matter of weeks. Shin closed his eyes in disappointment and continued, "Everyone except Mr. Han, please leave." He spoke with indifference. The employees exchanged glances before exiting the room. Shin couldn't believe he had wasted time discussing the company's plans with this group of people. They had casually suggested spending more money as if they were the ones holding the purse strings. However, they failed to grasp the financial realities. While the company's revenue had grown, the increased workforce, acquisition of factory space, and supply costs had taken a significant chunk, reducing the nearly 4 billion yen revenue to 1.9 billion. Managing all of this, along with the additional building and workspace, was no easy task, which was why Shin had hired qualified individuals for these roles. Yet these employees were casually throwing around the idea of spending more money without consideration, which deeply frustrated Shin. They hadn't been like this before, but now, their egos had inflated beyond reason. The mere thought of contracting a top celebrity for endorsements would cost millions of yen for just one commercial. And this group of employees was suggesting contracting many of them for months or even a year. They even have the audacity to suggest that the company should contract an international celebrity. Frankly, even the entirety of the company's funds wouldn't suffice to meet the demands of such individuals for a contract lasting several months or a year. The audacity of these employees was truly disappointing to Shin, as their thinking had been reduced to such a simplistic and costly solution. Chapter 41, Animation Studio. Shin and Li Han were left alone in the meeting room. Shin inquired, "How much does it cost to acquire a financially struggling animation company here in Japan?" He asked this question because the anime industry in this world was still in its initial stages, and animation studios were not in high demand compared to his previous life. "I haven't checked yet, but I'll look into it," replied Li Han, somewhat puzzled but willing to investigate. Shin nodded and continued, "If you happen to find a promising animation studio on the brink of bankruptcy, consider purchasing it and making it a subsidiary of Kishin." Li Han's confusion grew. He had initially thought they needed to find ways to spend funds more efficiently and cost-effectively. Why was the CEO considering buying an animation studio and turning it into a Kishin subsidiary? Wouldn't that be too costly? Shin noticed Li Han's doubts and simply smiled, knowing that he was the only one with knowledge of the future of the anime industry. His plan was to acquire an animation studio and produce an animated series based on The Legend of Zelda. He intended to strike agreements with popular broadcast channels in Tokyo to promote Kishin's upcoming The Legend of Zelda game. "Please educate the key employees at Kishin, Mr. Han," Shin said as he stood up and patted Li Han's shoulder. Li Han nodded and replied, "I will." To be honest, they've become rather complacent as the company has grown. After their conversation, Li Han respectfully bowed to Shin before leaving to search for a suitable animation studio to acquire. This task wasn't originally part of his job, but over time, he had assisted Shin with various tasks, both trivial and important, especially when Myra was attending university. Lee Han then called his team to help him identify an animation studio that met Shin's criteria. Meanwhile, in a certain animation studio in Tokyo's Nakano ward called Mad Ranch, there were approximately 40 hard-working employees. The studio director and CEO, Ishiji Murakami, who appeared to be around 30 years old, was the son of the studio's founder. Mad Ranch was facing financial difficulties, and Ishiji was racking his brain to find a way for the studio to survive. Funding from Tokyo Movie, which had been supporting Mad Ranch, was being discontinued due to financial constraints. As a result, Mad Ranch found itself struggling with limited funds. Due to this, many interested TV giants, such as Nippon TV, Suzuki Entertainment and Torah Entertainment, expressed their interest in acquiring a stake in Mad Ranch. Mad Ranch was a privately held company, meaning it was not publicly listed, yet these entertainment giants were eager to secure a piece of the company or acquire it outright. However, Ishiji Murakami couldn't make a hasty decision and agree to the demands of these corporate giants. They sought complete control over Mad Ranch, both inside and out. They even imposed restrictions on the hard-working employees who put in overtime for additional pay, limiting overtime hours. If an employee exceeded 50 hours of overtime, the company would cease paying them for overtime work, and this clause was not disclosed to the employees. Even with this knowledge, employees were compelled to continue overtime work or risk losing their jobs, as the culture of overtime was deeply ingrained in the company. Ishiji refused to accept such terms. He couldn't bear to wrong his employees, who were already struggling to earn extra income through overtime. He felt it was unjust, and he believed that not agreeing to these conditions was the only course of action he could take. Sitting in his office with him was the creative director of Mad Ranch. "Why don't we just agree? We're running out of funds, and it won't be long before we go bankrupt," the creative director, Hikaru, suggested. "No. Even if I have to use my own money to fund the company, I will never agree to the heartless demands of these big corporations," Ishiji stated firmly. "We may not have a choice." Hikaru sighed in helplessness. "I'm willing to contribute my own funds as well. How much money do you have in the bank?" Ishiji felt a bit awkward but replied, "I have about 15 million yen in the bank." Hikaru looked at him in disbelief. "Then our company is in dire straits. Even if we pool our money together, it probably won't be enough to cover the employees' salaries for several months." Ishiji appeared troubled, but he said, "Please, let's wait a while. Maybe there's a company out there with a shred of humanity left that will be willing to fund us." Hikaru shook his head in response. "A company with a bit of humanity left? Such a company may exist, but it's rare in Japan." He had worked for various companies before and found that many of them mistreated their employees through overwork and inadequate compensation. Ishiji couldn't help but chuckle helplessly. "Have a little faith in your country, won't you? You can't be so certain." Hikaru snorted and remarked, "Do you truly believe that a big company would retain any humanity? Even small companies can be cruel. In fact, small companies often tend to be more abusive and desperate than large ones." Ishiji simply shook his head with a sigh. Meanwhile, Lee Han sifted through stacks of papers containing information about animation companies. He eventually stumbled upon an animation company that met Shin's criteria. This company was currently struggling with limited funds and was actively seeking potential partners to provide funding for an animation project. While the company was originally searching for a customer to assist with an animation-related project, Lee Han saw a different opportunity. He believed this company was not only suitable for Shin's requirements but also a strong candidate for acquisition. Additionally, the animation company had a reputable history, having previously partnered with the Tokyo Movie, an influential entity in Japan. He continued to examine the various animation companies but ultimately concluded that the one he had come across earlier was the most suitable choice. Without wasting any time, he sprang into action and dialed the studio director's number for that particular animation company. Chapter 42, Popularity. Hello, this is the studio director of Madrange Trademark. Are you interested in requesting an animation project? Ishiji's voice, though forced to sound enthusiastic, came through on the other end of the phone. Hi, this is Li Han, the general counsel of Kishin Electronics. Li Han introduced himself to the other party. Oh, Kishin Electronics? Ah, yeah, do you need some animation help for your projects? Ishiji, although somewhat clueless about Kishin Electronics, tried to feign familiarity in the hope of securing a deal. I'm interested in meeting with you. Can we arrange a face-to-face meeting to discuss our potential collaboration? Li Han inquired. Of course. Let's meet at your place. Where is your location, sir? Ishiji, unaware of Li Han's true intentions, agreed to the meeting. No, I'll come to your company headquarters myself. Let's meet tomorrow, Li Han suggested with a friendly smile, to which Ishiji consented. Ishiji was in a good mood. The call seemed to bring the promise of a potential client who might request an animation project, which could translate into much-needed income for the company. He immediately called his friend and creative director, Hikaru. Hey, someone just called me. They want to meet to discuss potential business. Ishiji excitedly shared the news with Hikaru. Hikaru, equally surprised and excited, responded, Really? What's the name of the client or their company? Ishiji patted him on the shoulder and casually remarked, Who cares, it's not that important, anyway. Hikaru twitched in response and said, You're an idiot. Knowing our client is crucial. It helps us assess their situation and, if they're a big company, maybe we can negotiate a better deal for more money, right? Ishiji shook his head at his friend's persistence and finally revealed, Well, anyway, the company's name is Kishin. I actually don't know much about them. Hikaru nodded and felt a strange familiarity with the name. Yeah, maybe they're a small and lesser-known company, but something about the name rings a bell. Really? Ishiji raised an eyebrow, curious about Hikaru's sudden interest. Hikaru abruptly left the room, leaving Ishiji puzzled. After a while, Hikaru returned with a shocked expression. Ishiji inquired, What happened to you? Hikaru exclaimed, We've struck gold. Kishin is a rising company in Tokyo. Ishiji put down his pen and looked at Hikaru in amazement. Really? Hikaru nodded enthusiastically. Absolutely. I remember now. The reason the name Kishin sounded familiar is that my child kept pestering me to buy their Famicom. With Hikaru's excitement, Ishiji couldn't help but share in the excitement. The buzz around Kishin SKT Famicom continued to grow throughout the streets of Tokyo. This time, it wasn't just small-time journalist Koji Nishida from TBS covering the trend, various channels and media outlets were featuring it. The result was a surge in sales and an even higher demand for the gaming console. Distributors placed numerous orders with Kishin Electronics to meet the soaring demand. Due to Kishin's strict regulations set by its founder and CEO, Shinro Suzuki, key employees couldn't force workers to overwork. As a result, the company had to hire additional employees to fill time shifts. Meanwhile, a prominent TV channel was also covering the rise of Kishin, bringing even more attention to the company's meteoric success. NHK News, August 25, 1990. Opening music and NHK News theme. Yumi Yamamoto, journalist Konnichiwa, viewers. I'm Yumi Yamamoto, reporting for NHK News. Today, we bring you a remarkable story that's taking Tokyo by storm, one that's rekindling the flame of the video game industry. Camera shifts to Yumi Yamamoto standing in front of a bustling Tokyo arcade. Yumi Yamamoto, the world has thought video games had all but faded into obscurity, a new player has emerged, and it's electrifying the gaming landscape. We're talking about Kishin SKT Famicom. Images of Kishin SKT Famicom showcasing Super Mario Bros. Gameplay. Yumi Yamamoto, Kishin initially made waves in arcades with their groundbreaking game Super Mario Bros. It's unlike anything we've seen before. And now, they're expanding into the home gaming market with the Kishin SKT Famicom. Camera pans to a Kishin SKT Famicom console with a controller. Yumi Yamamoto, yes, you heard it right. Kishin's Famicom, a gaming console that's creating a buzz like never before. Cut to footage of people lining up at stores to purchase the Kishin SKT Famicom. Yumi Yamamoto, Tokyo residents are lining up at stores across the city to get their hands on the coveted Kishin SKT Famicom. It's a gaming sensation that's sweeping the nation. Images of people playing Super Mario Bros. On the Famicom. Yumi Yamamoto, and what's driving this newfound craze? It's the game that started it all, Super Mario Bros. This game, filled with colorful characters and innovative gameplay, is captivating players of all ages. Cut to an interview with a young gamer. Young gamer, I used to think video games were a thing of the past. But Kishin brought them back to life with Super Mario Bros. It's addictive, and I can't get enough of it. Return to Yumi Yamamoto. Yumi Yamamoto, Kishin SKT Famicom has breathed new life into video games industry. The Famicom is selling like hotcakes, and Super Mario Bros. Is becoming a household name. Camera zooms out to show Yumi Yamamoto with the bustling Tokyo arcade in the background. Yumi Yamamoto, it's clear that Kishin has reignited the passion for video games here in Tokyo, and we can't wait to see what this innovative company has in store for us next. Closing music and NHK News logo. Yumi Yamamoto, that's all for this NHK News report. Stay tuned for more updates on this gaming revolution. Arigatou gozaimasu. Chapter 43, Acquisition I. Click. The television screen blinked to darkness as Shiko turned it off, diverting his attention to his father, Shiro. Shiro's expression was unusually serious as he observed Kishin's remarkable rise in the business world. It was a highly profitable venture, unlike the video game industry of the past that he had disliked, dismissing it as an unprofitable and frivolous dream of his son. However, his disapproval had deeper roots. Shiro remembered his parents struggling when they faced bankruptcy in the arcade industry. Those difficult times had left a lasting impression on him, contributing to his disdain for video games. But now, the landscape had changed. Video games were on the rise again, and this time, things might be different. It's a shame that Kishin isn't listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. We can't invest, Shiro commented with a hint of regret in his voice. Shiko noticed his father's genuine interest in investing and decided to share his own intentions. Actually, I was thinking of investing in that company. Seiki even tried to contact them, but they declined to go public, and we couldn't get a piece of their success. Shiro nodded in understanding. Of course, they wouldn't agree so easily. The company is incredibly profitable now, and the owner likely wants to keep all the profits to himself. However, he may come to realize that for further expansion, he'll need to consider going public or allowing investors to join in. Shiko concurred with his father's assessment, and they both contemplated the potential investment opportunity. Shin and Myra had been together for some time now, and their relationship had evolved significantly. Physical contact between them was a natural and cherished part of their bond, and they openly discussed their plans while nestled in each other's arms. Shin had proposed marriage to Myra some time ago, but she had expressed her desire to finish her university studies before accepting. "Would you like to visit Osaka together, Myra?" Shin inquired with tenderness in his voice. Myra was taken aback by the suggestion. Her parents resided in Osaka's Chuo ward, and the idea of introducing them to her boyfriend was both nerve-wracking and exciting. "Are you suggesting we visit my parents?" Myra asked, her nerves palpable. She wasn't scared but rather anxious about her parents' reaction to her newfound relationship. Shin chuckled softly, reassured by Myra's response. With the efficient bullet train, they could reach Osaka in just a couple of hours. It was during this discussion that Shin realized, despite the company's skyrocketing revenue, he hadn't yet acquired his own vehicle or car. Shin contemplated the idea of acquiring a place and a car in the near future. However, given the company's tight finances, he understood the importance of being prudent with their money. He realized that taking things step by step was crucial, as one wrong move could jeopardize their financial stability. Early in the morning at 9 a.m., Ishiji warmly welcomed Lee Han to their modest studio. Hikaru and several employees also greeted Lee Han with formality, adhering to Japanese customs. Ishiji then ushered Lee Han into his office to commence their business discussion. The conversation began with some pleasantries and Ishiji's flattering remarks about Kishin's company. However, Lee Han eventually got straight to the point. "My boss wishes to acquire your company," Lee Han stated plainly. Studio director Ishiji came to a sudden halt, his expression frozen in disbelief. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. "You want to buy my company?" he asked incredulously. Lee Han could sense Ishiji's feelings of betrayal. Initially, Ishiji had assumed that Kishin sought animation-related services for a project. He never expected them to be interested in a full acquisition. Seeing Ishiji's indignation, he responded, "Please hear me out, Mr. Murakami." Ishiji, no longer concerned with politeness, retorted angrily, "I will never sell my company, not to you or anyone else. If you have nothing else to discuss, you can leave." This was a far cry from the more accommodating Ishiji of the past. He was resolute in his decision. Lee Han, however, wasn't ready to give up so easily. He quickly retrieved a document and placed it in front of Ishiji. "Please, Mr. Murakami, take a look at these terms before you dismiss the offer." Ishiji, clearly frustrated, tossed the paper back at Lee Han. "I don't need to read it. I know it's going to be the same unbearable and inhumane terms as always." He had seen these tactics from other corporations before, greedy attempts to exploit employees and deepen the culture of overworking. Lee Han observed Ishiji's concern for his employees and the company, prompting him to quickly provide reassurance. "Mr. Murakami," he began, "I can't speak to your past experiences with other corporations, but I promise you that what's written in this document is genuinely different, and it aligns with your vision." As he spoke, he retrieved the paper that Ishiji had previously discarded and placed it back in front of him. Although Ishiji was still harboring some anger, he decided to take a closer look at the paper out of curiosity. Unbeknownst to both Lee Han and Ishiji, several employees and the creative director were intently eavesdropping, their ears pressed against the walls of the studio director's office. One of the employees whispered to the others, "It looks like we've run into bad luck once more. It's yet another terrible company trying to take everything for themselves." The others nodded in agreement, sharing their colleagues' concerns. Hikaru, the creative director, quickly gestured for silence to ensure they could hear the conversation more clearly. As Ishiji continued to read through the paper, he found himself genuinely surprised by its contents. "Are these terms for real?" he asked Lee Han in astonishment. Lee Han responded with a reassuring smile. "Absolutely. These conditions were established by my company's CEO himself." Ishiji regarded Lee Han thoughtfully, maintaining a level of caution. "We should have a lawyer examine this carefully. I don't want to overlook any potential hidden traps, or discover later that this was just a facade and not the actual terms and conditions." Lee Han continued to smile, nodding in agreement. "Of course. If these terms and conditions are indeed genuine, then I have no objections to selling my company to Kishin and making it a subsidiary," Ishiji declared. However, those who had been listening from the other side of the wall were left shocked by Ishiji's unexpected change of heart. Chapter 44, Shin's nervous. While Lee Han was discussing with Ishiji, Shin and Myra headed to Osaka. It was a sunny Sunday, August 26, 1990, when Shin and Myra, dressed impeccably, awaited the arrival of the bullet train. Myra felt comfortable leaning on Shin's shoulder. After all, they were officially a couple and at ease in each other's presence. They even shared a spoon as they had already shared a kiss. When the train finally arrived, Shin and Myra boarded it. After a few hours, they reached Osaka. Upon disembarking, Shin and Myra joyfully engaged in conversation with each other. Subsequently, they visited other tourist attractions in Osaka, including Osaka Castle, Tsutenkaku Tower, and Shitenoji Temple. Shin and Myra happily snapped photos together with the camera Shin had purchased. They relished the sight of cherry blossoms and indulged in street food and restaurant delicacies in Dotonbori. Beep beep. Shin's Suzuki phone rang, and he hastily answered it, discovering that the caller was none other than Lee Han. "Hello, how are you doing?" Shin inquired. "Mr. Suzuki, the owner of the animation studio company, has agreed to sell their animation company based on the terms and agreements you outlined." Shin smiled. He had previously been informed by Lee Han that Madranch, an animation studio, was struggling. Shin believed it was the ideal animation studio for him to acquire, so he had drafted terms and conditions that would benefit the company. For instance, Shin wouldn't have complete control over their operations but could occasionally suggest ideas. The control would remain with the studio director or Ishiji as long as he did a good job. Shin abolished overtime, ensuring that employees wouldn't have to overwork but would still receive double their regular salary, and even more if the animated content became popular. The company would also hire more staff to cover shifts without affecting current employees' salaries. The terms seemed too good to be true, and anyone hearing them might have thought their ears were deceiving them. "That's great news. If you'd like, you can handle the processing procedure with one of our key employees at Kishin Company tomorrow," Shin offered. He felt a bit embarrassed about handing this task to Lee Han, especially on a Sunday. "No, it's fine. I'll take care of it," Lee Han replied. Despite any inconvenience, he believed it was all worthwhile due to the generous salary Shin was providing. Shin continued, "Regarding the price, start with 300 million yen to gauge their reaction. If we can acquire it at a lower price, it would be even better." Lee Han agreed, and they engaged in light conversation before ending the call. Myra gazed at Shin curiously and asked, "Was it the animation studio you mentioned wanting to acquire for your game adaptations into anime, like The Legend of Zelda?" Shin nodded thoughtfully and said, "Not only The Legend of Zelda, but I've also considered adapting other games into anime. Additionally, Kishin Animation will produce stories unrelated to our games, ensuring profitability for the animation company subsidiary." Shin planned to recreate successful anime from his previous life. Myra nodded in understanding and replied, "I see." After enjoying their time exploring Osaka's tourist spots, they decided to visit Chuo Ward, where Myra's parents lived. Initially, Shin wasn't nervous, but as he approached his future in-laws' place, he felt his heart pounding nervously. Myra noticed and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Shin nodded quickly, "I'm okay." They arrived at the Sakura residence, Myra's family home. It was a typical Japanese house, neither too large nor too small. Despite his initial nervousness, Shin mustered the courage to ring the doorbell himself, stopping Myra from pressing it. Myra looked at Shin affectionately, recognizing his effort. If she were in his shoes, she would likely feel nervous too, especially about meeting her future mother-in-law. But in Shin's case, it was the opposite, he was nervous about meeting his future father-in-law. Inside the Sakura residence. "Minji, please answer the door," ordered Miku, a middle-aged woman, to her daughter, who appeared to be a high school student. The young girl resembled Myra with her beautiful appearance, but she had pink hair, giving her a cuter look. She had been engrossed in watching the latest trend in Tokyo, the Kishin SKT Famicom, and reluctantly snapped out of her thoughts when her mother spoke. "Complaining," she said, "who's bothering us at this hour, especially on a Sunday?" Her father, named Daiichi, replied, just go and open the door, will you? It might be someone important, while reading a newspaper. With no other choice, Minji opened the door and peered outside. But as she did so and saw who was at the gate, her excitement bubbled over, and she immediately ran towards her big sister while shouting, "Big sister!" She swung open the gate and hugged her big sister in happiness. "How have you been, Minji?" Myra asked, smiling as she affectionately stroked her sister's hair. "I've been doing great," Minji happily responded. Inside the house, Myra's parents heard their younger daughter exclaiming "big sister" and exchanged surprised glances. Chapter 45, Meeting with the Future In-Laws. Minji couldn't contain her excitement and joy when she suddenly spotted a young man standing next to her big sister. "Hey, who are you, and why are you with my big sister? Are you some kind of pervert?" Minji questioned, her alarm evident. Myra smiled at her sister's reaction and introduced the young man, saying, "Minji, don't be rude. This is Shinro Suzuki." She added shyly, "He's my boyfriend." Minji initially was just surprised to see the young man introduced by her big sister, but when she heard those last words, she was taken aback and stammered, "Wh what? He's your boyfriend." Shin smiled faintly at her adorable reaction. Myra quickly covered her mouth and whispered to Minji, "Please don't be so loud. I'll introduce him properly to Mom and Dad later so they can get to know him better." Minji was still somewhat shocked but nodded with a surprised expression. In just a moment, their parents appeared after hearing Minji's earlier exclamation. When they arrived and saw who was standing at the doorway, it was indeed their elder daughter. Daichi and Miku immediately embraced her warmly. Miku then asked in surprise, "Why are you here? Don't you still have a semester to complete?" Daichi nodded, wearing a concerned expression. "You're not skipping coursework, are you?" Myra smiled helplessly and explained, "No, of course not. Don't forget, today is Sunday." Daichi and Miku flinched slightly and responded, "Even so, that's not a reason to be complacent." Daichi exclaimed, with Miku nodding in agreement. Miku continued, "Let's head inside. Standing out here won't do us any good." "Yeah, let's go," Daichi added, attempting to lead Myra into the house and paying no attention to Shin, who was standing beside her. Myra stopped in her tracks and said to her parents, "Wait, please invite Shin as well." She held onto Shin's forearm, who was standing beside her. Her mom and dad halted and quickly turned their attention to Shin, whom Myra was holding. "Who is he, Myra-chan?" Miku asked, her eyes lighting up with curiosity. Daichi also looked at him, his eyes revealing an unknown expression. "Yeah, Myra. Why don't you introduce us to this young man?" Daichi inquired without displaying much emotion. Myra felt somewhat uncomfortable with her parents' reaction, and Shin, although not as nervous as before, felt a bit awkward as well. "This is Shinro Suzuki," Myra introduced and then presented her parents to Shin, saying, "Shin, this is my mom, Miku, and this is my dad, Daichi." Shin smiled politely and offered a formal bow. "It's a pleasure to meet all of you," he said with politeness. Miku and Daichi exchanged frowns, and Daichi asked, "Is he your friend, Myra?" Myra hesitated, unsure if she should reveal her relationship with Shin under these circumstances. "Come on, honey, don't intimidate the young man. Let's head inside first." Miku quickly interjected, seeing Myra's hesitancy. Daichi snapped out of his thoughts and nodded, saying, "You're right, I was being impolite. After all, he is our guest. Let's go inside." With that, Shin, Myra, Minji, and the two parents entered the house. As Shin stepped inside, he couldn't help but notice that the house felt orderly and inviting. They proceeded to the living room, where Myra's mother invited Shin to join them for a meal in the dining room adjacent to the living room. Miku hurriedly prepared a meal to welcome Myra back. "Myra, you should have called to let us know you were coming back with a guest. We could have prepared something, especially since you brought a guest," Miku pouted as she voiced her complaint. Daichi nodded in agreement. Myra could only blush with embarrassment. "It's all right, Auntie. I'm not that hungry," Shin replied politely to Myra's mom. "How can that be? I know that you and Myra traveled for hours from Tokyo to Osaka, so you too must be hungry," Miku exclaimed urgently, ignoring the fact that Shin had called her auntie. Shin and Myra exchanged glances. Myra's parents were unaware that they had already enjoyed a food adventure around Osaka. Shin understood that Myra's parents wouldn't want their efforts to go to waste, so he could only sit helplessly at the dining room with Myra. Meanwhile, Minji couldn't help but giggle at Shin and Myra's situation. She was the only one who knew about their relationship, but she wasn't inclined to casually reveal it. After coaxing Shin and Myra into having a meal, Miku and Daichi engaged in a light conversation with Myra and Shin for a while. After some time, Daichi gestured for Miku to join him upstairs. Miku left Myra and Shin, ascending the stairs to speak privately with Daichi. Whispering, Daichi expressed his concern to Miku, saying, "Honey, don't you think that Myra and this Shinro are exceptionally close?" Miku nodded and replied, "Yes, I sense that their relationship is more than just a simple one." Worry crept into her eyes as she added, "I have a feeling that their connection is much closer and more complex." Daichi's expression turned solemn as he contemplated this. Seeing her husband's serious demeanor, Miku continued, "But let's not pressure them too much. Myra will eventually reveal it to us on her own." Daichi nodded, despite feeling a pang of sadness at the thought that his beloved daughter might be growing closer to someone else. Chapter 46, Myra's family's disbelief. Myra's parents returned to the dining table and resumed their meal with Myra and Shin. After a while, Myra suddenly spoke up, saying, "Mom, Dad. There's something I want to confess to both of you." Miku and Daichi became alert, and Miku inquired, "What is it?" Myra fell silent for a moment, exchanging a glance with Shin, who nodded in support. Encouraged, Myra regained her courage. Miku and Daichi had a sudden premonition as Myra resolutely looked at them. Taking a deep breath, Myra finally said, "Mom, Dad," she announced, "Shin and I are in a relationship." Myra's parents were left utterly dumbfounded by the straightforwardness of her confession, while Minji couldn't help but giggle with amusement. Although Miku and Daichi had expected it, hearing the words directly from Myra still managed to shock them. Daichi stammered, You're in a relationship." He grabbed a glass and hastily filled it with water, taking a drink to calm himself down. Miku was equally taken aback as she asked, "Are you saying that you two are a couple now?" Daichi couldn't handle it and immediately covered his ears in disbelief. Shin felt that Myra's parents were perhaps overreacting a bit, while Myra shot him a look that conveyed her amusement at her parents' exaggerated response. Myra simply nodded in response to her mother's question. Miku, in her concern and anger, hastily inquired, "What about your university? What about your future? I understand that you're at the right age for a relationship, but have you thought about your future?" Daichi nodded in agreement and added with a touch of anger, "Indeed. Do you think a young man like him can take care of you? He might still be living under his parents' roof, and you believe he can provide for you? What can he offer you? And what about your future children? What will their future be like?" Daichi's words came out in a flurry of emotions. Not only Myra and Shin were taken aback, but even Minji and Miku gazed at Daichi in astonishment. Feeling somewhat awkward under everyone's scrutiny, Daichi asked, "What's wrong?" Miku sighed and addressed Myra, "While your father may have gone a bit far, he has a point. Have you considered the consequences of being in a relationship? It's not easy." Myra and Shin exchanged glances, and Myra said with a reassuring smile, "Mom, Dad, you don't need to worry about Shin's capabilities. Despite his youthful appearance, he's actually the boss I mentioned on the phone. The entire family froze, their attention now on Shin. Daiichi found it hard to believe and remarked, "You don't need to make up stories, Myra." Miku nodded in agreement. Myra shook her head firmly and stated, "No. I'm not making this up." Looking at Myra's determined expression, Miku couldn't sense any deception. "Even if he is the boss you're talking about, I'm sure he's relying on his parents' money," Miku exclaimed, with Daiichi nodding in agreement. "No. I was with Shin from the beginning when he built his small company into what it is now," Myra exclaimed passionately, momentarily forgetting that her family had no knowledge of Shin's company. Miku and Daiichi were taken aback by Myra's outburst, and Miku quickly asked, "Small company? Can you tell us what company your boyfriend owns?" Minji, who had been silent for a while, was also curious. She hadn't expected her future brother-in-law to be an entrepreneur. Myra looked at Shin, seeking his permission to reveal the information she had unknowingly blurted out earlier. Shin nodded with a reassuring smile and said, "It's okay. You can tell them." The family was perplexed by Shin's response. Myra nodded shyly and revealed, "Shin's company is called Kishin Electronics." Miku and Daiichi exchanged puzzled glances, trying to recall where they had heard that name before. Minji, who had been quiet for a moment, suddenly exclaimed, "I know that company. It's been the talk of Tokyo, the rising company. Kishin." Miku and Daiichi's memories were jogged by Minji's reminder, and they turned to look at Shin with shocked expressions. Miku and Daiichi stared at Shin in disbelief, saying in unison, "It can't be. You're too young." Minji exclaimed once more, "According to the articles, the Kishin company's CEO is a young man, as per the TBS interview. If he's really my big sister's boyfriend, then he meets all the criteria." The pieces of information finally began to click into place for Myra's parents as they remembered reading about Kishin in articles and seeing it on television. When they had read about it, they hadn't been particularly interested, but meeting the person who had been covered in newspapers and on television was an entirely different matter. Now they were struggling to come to terms with the fact that their eldest daughter was in a relationship with such a young and successful man. The family, including Minji, still harbored doubts, so Minji quickly made a request, "If you're truly the CEO of Kishin Company, it should be a breeze for you to get me a Kishin SKT Famicom, right?" Chapter 47, Acquisition 2. Myra felt embarrassed for her younger sister and scolded her gently, "Minji, please don't be rude." Minji pouted and replied, "I just wanted to know if he could get me one." Myra was about to speak when their parents chimed in, "Myra, your little sister has a point. If he's really a wealthy young man, he should be able to prove it, right?" Miku stated. Myra then turned to Shin to gauge his opinion. Shin simply smiled and said, "It's just a Kishin SKT Famicom, isn't it? All right, I'll get you one." Minji's eyes lit up with excitement as she exclaimed, "Really? Then please, get me one." She had always wanted to have one, being interested in new and exciting gadgets. Upon hearing from Myra that her boyfriend, Shin, was the CEO of the Kishin company, Minji wanted to try her luck. Shin retrieved his phone from his pocket, which surprised both Minji and Myra's parents. Shin dialed a number and made a call. The phone rang for a moment before someone picked up on the other end. "Hello, sir. Do you have any tasks for me?" a man's voice inquired. Shin greeted first and then stated, "I'd like you to deliver a Kishin SKT Famicom." He also provided the address of Myra's family's residence, to Osaka, Chuo XXX. "Now?" the man asked. "Yes, right now," Shin replied with a nod. "Understood. It should arrive by tomorrow," the voice on the other end confirmed. Shin ended the call with a simple thank you. "It'll arrive tomorrow," Shin informed Minji. Minji cheered with excitement. Myra's parents continued to regard Shin with skepticism. After that, the conversation resumed its awkward tone. Myra's parents seemed to ignore Shin, except for Minji, who continued to chat with him. Later on, Myra and Shin said their goodbyes. Myra's parents didn't forget to remind Myra to be cautious around Shin. Myra nodded in agreement, feeling somewhat helpless. With that, she looped her arm through Shin's and leaned close to him as they walked away. Myra's family watched this display, and Daiichi couldn't help but furrow his brow. Our child is growing up so quickly, isn't she? Honey. Miku commented with a smile. Daiichi nodded with a slight frown. Miku chuckled at his reaction. I'm so jealous of my big sister. I want a boyfriend too. Minji sighed wistfully as she observed Myra and Shin walking together in the distance. Daiichi and Miku redirected their attention to Minji and firmly declared, no. Focus on your education before entering into a romantic relationship. Minji pouted upon hearing her parents' words. Meanwhile, Lee Han and Ishiji had completed their discussions with the hired lawyers and engaged in a conversation of their own. Mr. Suzuki is interested in purchasing your company for 300 million yen, Lee Han informed Ishiji after going over the details. Ishiji gulped nervously. After all, that was 300 million yen. He even felt tempted to agree immediately. After all, the animation studio was an inheritance he had received from his father. So, the land, equipment, and other items he used, he didn't know their true market value. Still, he couldn't help but feel they wouldn't add up to 300 million yen. He had upgraded some equipment himself, spending hundreds of thousands of yen or, at most, a few million yen, but nowhere near hundreds of millions. Ishiji didn't know how to respond. Lee Han looked at him seriously, and Ishiji couldn't resist his temptation. All right. I agree. 300 million yen it is. Lee Han smiled upon hearing this and stood up, extending a hand for a handshake, which Ishiji gladly accepted. Shin, who was on the train with Myra on their way back to Tokyo, received a phone call from Lee Han. Shin answered it promptly upon seeing that it was Lee Han calling. Hello, Mr. Han. What's the news? Shin inquired as soon as he answered the call. Mr. Suzuki, we've acquired the animation company for 300 million yen, Lee Han reported. Really? That's great. Shin smiled and felt pleased. But, Mr. Suzuki, are you sure you weren't too generous with the offer of 300 million yen for such a small company? Lee Han asked curiously. Shin just smiled and replied, it doesn't matter. Big corporations like Nippon TV, Suzuki, and Torah were interested in acquiring it. That alone suggests it's worth the investment. Lee Han didn't have much knowledge about anime, so he simply nodded in agreement. After a brief conversation with Lee Han, Shin ended the call. He began contemplating which anime from his previous life he should reproduce in this world. Pokemon would be a suitable choice. Shin mused with a smile. However, before he could create a Pokemon anime, he would need to develop a Pokemon game with his programmers. Since people in this world might not be familiar with the concept of Pokemon, he decided to create an anime to introduce them to the fantasy world of Pokemon. Chapter 48, Competition. 2 months had passed since the acquisition of the animation company, and Kishin Electronics' revenue had soared to 6.5 billion yen. This impressive growth was bolstered by the release of new video games like Donkey Kong and Excite Bike. The Kishin Famicom had become a sensation, with approximately 300,000 units sold across Japan. This achievement was nothing short of breathtaking. One young adult named Fuji, who had programming skills, had the chance to play one of Kishin's games and was utterly exhilarated. After receiving his salary, he wasted no time getting his hands on a Famicom. He immersed himself in games like Super Mario Bros. And Donkey Kong, experiencing the thrill of gaming. However, when he switched off the Famicom and turned on the TV, he was met with an unexpected surprise: the advertisement for a new rival game console, the Torah 16-bit video game entertainment system. Meet the most powerful video game console available today. The Torah 16-bit video game entertainment system. Experience superior gameplay and performance with Torah games. All for just 14,000 yen. Fuji couldn't help but curse, "Why now? I just bought the Famicom." Many others across Japan shared Fuji's frustration, especially in Tokyo, where most Famicom units had been sold. Shin examined the sleek, black 16-bit video game console from Torah with a serious expression. Lee Han and Myra watched him with a sense of concern. "What do we do now? They've released a new and better product than ours." Myra voiced her worries. Lee Han inspected the Torah video game console with a somber demeanor, thinking, why did this happen now, just when the Legend of Zelda anime was about to conclude? Shin picked up one of the game cartridges for Torah games. The title featured a smiling flame with oversized boots, displaying sharp teeth. "Let's see what kind of game they have in store for us," Shin said, calmly inserting the game cartridge into the 16-bit console. As the console booted up, the television displayed the title Happy. A quality theme filled the air, and a smiling flame character appeared on the screen against a cheerful background. The concept reminded Shin of Mario, he thought. He pressed the start button, and the game began. In this game, the flame character was small, and water ball mobs attempted to extinguish the character's fire by throwing water. Shin took control of the character, which could not only defend but also attack. The character released a small fireball from its mouth, turning the water ball mobs into a plume of smoke as they disappeared. "This is intriguing," Shin thought with excitement. He continued to control the character as it advanced, much like Super Mario Bros., progressing to the right side of the screen. As he advanced, the character encountered trees and grass. Shin initially thought they would harm him, but to his surprise, they burned and turned to dust as he approached. However, as his character interacted with them, its flame slowly dwindled. So, Shin decided to avoid the trees and grass. Soon, when he believed his character wouldn't level up further, treasure chests appeared on the screen. Shin attacked each one. While some contained gold, one of the treasure chests turned out to be a running fireball. Shin guided his character to catch it, causing the character to grow larger and its flames to become even redder and more intense. At the end of the stage, Shin's character reached an erupting volcano. He positioned his character on top of the volcano's mouth, which then burst open. Shin's character soared into the sky, and a text appeared on the screen, along with the displayed scores. "This game. It's reminiscent of Mario but unique at the same time," Lee Han exclaimed as he observed the gameplay. Other employees watched with concern, feeling a sense of competition. "The graphics are impressive as well," Shin admitted, continuing to play. "What should we do now, sir?" one of the employees anxiously inquired. Shin didn't provide an immediate response. Instead, he changed the game cartridge to explore other titles. Shin had expected the other games to match the quality of Happy, but to his disappointment, they were subpar compared to 8-bit games. Upon realizing this, the employees breathed a sigh of relief. "It appears they put a lot of effort into this one," Shin said with a smile, "but they haven't fully realized the potential of this 16-bit console." He grinned. "What do you mean, sir?" one of the employees asked, puzzled. "Myra, please have your team reverse engineer this console," Shin requested with a smile, not directly addressing the employee's question. Myra continued to look at Shin with concern but ultimately nodded. Shin smiled confidently. He hadn't agreed to a deeper partnership with Torah Electronics because he hoped they would release their own game console, which he could then have his company reverse engineer. This would allow his company to develop its games for the 16-bit console. Shin understood that with his company's financial resources, they could only establish a small research team, whereas larger corporations had more extensive research teams. With this, Shin's plan to develop game consoles from 8-bit to 16-bit became more concrete with the early appearance of the 16-bit system. Chapter 49, The Behemoths. The sales of the Kishin Famicom took a hit after the release of the Torah 16-bit VG console. Inside the Suzuki chairman's office, Chairman Shiro sat with his sons, watching the TV news unfold. I never expected Torah Corporation to launch their console independently. Weren't they in partnership with Kishin? Shiro mused. Shiko and Seiki nodded in agreement. Shiko added, Father, I believe this is an opportune moment to consider acquiring Kishin. Seiki chimed in, Indeed. It seems Kishin is facing a crisis with others encroaching on their video game market. Shiro remained contemplative. If Kishin doesn't cooperate, we can always develop our own console like Torah did. Let's see if a smaller company can withstand the might of giants, he chuckled. Shiko and Seiki exchanged glances. Just a day after the release of the Torah VG entertainment system, they managed to sell at least 13,000 units in Japan, thanks to their Torah department store and various other retail locations. During a Torah board of directors meeting, Asahi occupied the head seat. One of the directors voiced concern, now that we've entered this unfamiliar market, we must dominate it thoroughly to withstand any potential counterattack from the Suzuki Group. Another director agreed cautiously, yes, but let's not drop our guard. It's the Suzuki Group, after all. Asahi listened attentively to the director's discussions and then calmly remarked, I believe there's no need to fret over the Suzuki Group for the time being. He wore a knowing smile as he tapped his fingers on the table. Curiosity piqued, the vice chairman Jin inquired, What do you mean by that? Others chimed in, Why shouldn't we worry? Asahi's smile widened as he shared, I received information from my source within the Suzuki Group. While they are indeed interested in entering the video game market, they are lagging behind us in preparations. In essence, they haven't made any significant strides yet. Vice Chairman Jin frowned and inquired, Do you genuinely believe that? What if it's merely a facade put on by the Suzuki Group? Other directors also voiced their concerns, saying, Yes, how can we place full trust in your informant? Indeed, even if it's 90% accurate, we should remain vigilant about their actions. Chairman Asahi regarded them with a serene smile. You're absolutely correct in saying that we should remain vigilant, but we shouldn't allow excessive worry to limit our actions. We must strike a balance, for excessive caution may lead to defeat. And regarding the reliability of my informant, rest assured, they can be trusted. As for the why, I must keep that as my secret. The board of directors exchanged uneasy glances. Chairman Asahi continued, We've developed a 16-bit system that can outperform the Kishin Famicom in numerous aspects, but we're still behind in sales compared to them. Other directors reassured him, that's to be expected on the first day of release. Just wait for a few weeks a few days, and we'll push Kishin to the brink of despair. There's no doubt about that. Vice Chairman Jin added, Indeed, we must release as many games as Kishin, or even more. The directors nodded in agreement. However, Chairman Asahi shook his head and explained, No, you're mistaken. Video games are one of the reasons why Kishin is successful, and flooding the market with too many games isn't the solution. Vice Chairman Jin wore a puzzled expression as he asked, Then why am I mistaken? Isn't releasing numerous game cartridges a way to profit from them? Other directors chimed in, That's a valid point. Game cartridges can be surprisingly profitable. Chairman Asahi shook his head again and revealed, Do you know why the arcade industry eventually failed? Seeing the director's attentive expressions, Chairman Asahi continued, It was because there were too many games. Most of these video games were unplayable trash, and this contributed to the decline of the entire arcade industry. A hushed silence followed his words. Chairman Asahi emphasized, Quality is just as crucial as quantity. Before we release any game cartridges, we must ensure they are at least playable. The board of directors nodded in agreement. Following this, Chairman Asahi signaled to the individual responsible for data analysis to present their findings. Our most beloved game, according to our survey, is Happy, the employee reported to the directors. Meanwhile, Chairman Asahi discreetly cast a cold look in Vice Chairman Jin's direction. You think you're clever, don't you? Planting a covert operative by my side? I must admit, it's half smart, half foolish. Little do you know that your spy became mine. Let's see what you're up to, Chairman Asahi thought, harboring a sense of intrigue. The Torah Electronics supply contract with Kishin is set to expire on January 1, 1991. Consequently, Shin is racing against the clock to establish his own factory for producing the components required by his company. Shin, armed with his knowledge, lent a helping hand to Myra and her team in reverse engineering the Torah 16-bit system. While his understanding of computer systems was limited, Shin managed to grasp the intricacies of the Torah console's PCB board, though the CPU remained the most challenging component. Nevertheless, Shin found that his knowledge from his previous life proved invaluable as he methodically examined the 16-bit system. Seems like we need to recruit more professionals, Shin murmured, gazing at a page filled with notes about the 16-bit console. Chapter 50, People's Opinions. Shin had conveyed his orders to his employees responsible for recruiting people just a few days ago. He needed more professionals in the computer field. After dealing with all of that, he planned to visit Madrange Studio in his newly purchased Mercedes 190E. He opened the car door and drove his way to Nakano Ward. It took him nearly 15 to 20 minutes to arrive at the animation studio. He parked the car and then made his way into the studio. Being the new owner of the animation studio and having introduced himself to the Madrange employees previously, they recognized him immediately upon his arrival. Good afternoon, boss, one of the employees greeted Shin with a smile, and Shin returned the greeting with a smile. Why is the young boss here? Well, maybe it's about the anime production. Shin ignored the employee's whispers and proceeded to the studio director's office. Ishiji noticed him and greeted, "Oh, what brings you here, Mr. Suzuki?" Shin responded with a smile before asking, "How's the production of The Legend of Zelda?" Ishiji, who initially had a furrowed brow, replied, "That anime." He added with a relaxed expression, "Oh, we've already finished animating it. The only thing left is the dubbing." Shin smiled in relief and said, "Good. The Legend of Zelda game has also been completed. We'll release it tomorrow, and with the anime set to release, everything is already prepared." Meanwhile, a young man who had just received his salary was facing a dilemma. He called his friend on the phone and asked, "Hey, which console should I buy, the SKT Famicom or the Torah VG Entertainment System 16-bit? I'm leaning towards the Torah VG console, but I'd like to hear your opinion." "Don't buy the Torah 16-bit. You'll regret it." His friend on the other end of the phone exclaimed. "What do you mean? They claim it's better than Kishin, so why would I regret it?" The young man inquired. "The Torah 16-bit has some interesting games like Happy, but apart from that, there aren't many compelling games." His friend responded. "Can I play Kishin games on the Torah 16-bit?" The young man attempted to ask but was interrupted by his friend. "Idiot! You can't play Kishin games on the Torah 16-bit." The young man felt speechless and remarked, "Isn't Kishin the same? They only have Super Mario or Pac-Man as the interesting ones." His friend replied with emphasis, "Fool! Kishin still has more exciting games compared to Torah, which is just starting. They have Donkey Kong, Excite Bike, Pro Wrestling, and more upcoming games will be released according to the Kishin website." The young man was left speechless once again and asked, "Wait. Kishin has a website? Are you living under a rock? Doesn't your family have a 28 kilobits internet connection? How do you not know this?" The young man simply replied, you know I became independent a long time ago. Whatever, his friend ended the call without hesitation. However, other people held opposing opinions, and debates arose in various places. I can't help but feel that Torah's Happy is much more interesting than Mario. Yet, Happy is just a Super Mario Bros. Copycat. It's not a copycat. Not a copycat? They completely copied it, except they changed the theme. Who said Mario is the only one who can have that gameplay? Super Mario Bros. Is the original. Every time I play it, I discover something new, even if I repeat playing it. There's always some secret technique of gameplay or a hidden box. Unlike that dull Happy. Just a few minutes of playing, and I'm bored because I don't see anything new. That the Torah supporter couldn't argue with. It had been a few days since the release of the Torah 16-bit video game console. Contrary to the expectations of Torah's board of directors, the Torah 16-bit didn't dominate over the Kishin SKT Famicom. It did impact the sales of the Kishin Famicom, but Kishin was still in the lead. In fact, after the initial hype surrounding the Torah 16-bit VG entertainment system, its sales declined. Torah attempted to release games like Boxing, inspired by Kishin Pro Wrestling. However, it still couldn't surpass Kishin due to the fact that Torah couldn't maximize the graphical potential of a 16-bit system. Their games played much like 8-bit games, except for having a broader color palette, which didn't significantly enhance the gaming experience for players.